Shalom family. As always, at the 10-minute mark, we're going to say the Lord's Prayer. So bow with me as we say the Lord's Prayer. Be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be. Forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on a righteous path and guard us from the evil one. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. Amen, amen. Shalom, family. Shalom, shalom. Let me just turn this thing off real fast. All right. So today we're using a different method today. We're on the phone. We're not on the computer. We have some problems going on with the computer, but we're going to continue on the phone. The only problem is I have to find another way to get the brothers on the live with me, because on the phone it can only be one person. But I wanted to go through something. I wanted to go over something today for the sake of understanding. And the reason why I want to go is because there's certain things that we need to understand, such as the order of things. But I'm not going to go over it today. I was going to go over it today, but I'm going to do a fast run on the live today, and we're going to go over it tomorrow. Understand it. But what I want to do today is I wanted to play a video. What we're going to talk about. What we're going to talk about is so important that many people don't even know that they're talking about it daily. When people talk about Illuminati and Freemasons and stuff like that, they don't even know what they're really talking about. They're actually talking about a group of people that are reigning over the whole world right now, for the sake of understanding. And people came from the Scythians, for the sake of understanding, and the Samaritans, for the sake of understanding. And these people, for the sake of understanding, were known for the history of Magog. And we're going to see that today. In fact, the place where it came from is known as the cradle of nations, for the sake of understanding. Down to something. We already looked at a little bit of DNA studies, but I want to show you an interesting DNA study. Go down a little bit right here. Here's the site. I'll click it just to show you it's a real, actual government study. A little study that they had on the Y chromosome. So you can see now it's important. The reason why this is important because what you're going to see here is that this is actually talking about the Y chromosome. Now, why is this important? Because they'll tell you that the chromosome doesn't matter. Why? Well, you're going to find out why it matters. You're going to find out exactly why it matters, because this is what their concept is. And I'm going to convert it to Judaism. I want to let you hear them. Basically say this. I wish I could move this thing. For some reason, that's the only thing about this thing. I can't move this.
Right now on Jewish Voice with Jonathan Burns.
And so whether they're Native American or of Jewish ancestry,
Their flight.
I want you to see this.
Give me Judaism for Dummies. I'm really reading up on it. It's very exciting for me and for many of the guests on the show, including, of course, Neil Sackmary of Nevada Coimart, my achi, and Rabbi
I want you to hear this.
Shuhatz of Chabad, East Las Vegas. I'm getting better and better, and you notice that I've been getting better and better at saying these names. Who knew?
Last time he told you that you might have been Jewish.
And he was right on the nose.
Oh my goodness.
So Rabbi, all right, here's the deal. My DNA test showing that I have Jewish genealogy. What advice do you think the rabbi has for me?
Well, so the thing is that there's a part of being Jewish and there's a part of being Jewish, and so your part of being Jewish is a smaller part than others, but it still is
10% better than no percent.
I agree 100%, and so we're happy to embrace you.
This is great. I'm glad I'm in the club. Now, Rabbi, what I find out.
Good news. Are you happy to be?
I was excited. I've been thrilled. This is great. AshkeNazi Jewish genealogy is what it says. I'm 9.9%. What exactly does that mean?
Okay, so Judaism is a little bit different than any other religion.
Yeah. Watch what he says here. Watch what he says.
Judaism goes by the mother.
You heard what he just said there? Now, this is important because we have scriptures just like Numbers right here, where it says in Numbers 18, it says, and they assembled. But watch what else is said here. Very important stuff here. Very, very important.
If your mother was Jewish, then you automatically Jewish. If your father, he was only by the mother. He only really hard when her mother was Jewish.
The irony that somehow getting married.
You heard what they just said? This is a common thing that supposedly if someone has a Jewish mother, right, they say that they're Jewish. Now, what's the problem with that? They just confirmed with all authority of understanding the actual information that even looking at the mother's line, that the mother's line is 100% not Jewish, for the sake of understanding. Very important. Before it started getting messed up and everything. But we were showing a little video on how the person went up there and they showed the actual DNA results, and he told the truth. He said that that's not true. He said by genetics, they're not what they say they are, for the sake of understanding. And just for the sake of understanding, I want to see if I had that video, to be honest with you. Let's grab that, if I have that on here. Let's see. In fact, that's on another note. That's right here. I just want to show you that video just to show you, just to give that reminder, because I just want to show that we're talking about things that are not something that people don't know, but people know these things. So I'm going to go to 1225 here, and I want you to see.
So one of the more exciting subjects I have found is the study of the seminal people, the Jews. Judaism, after all, maintains in part its tribal roots. It's one of the few religions, other than, let's say,
let's go here.
Ancestry was formed. As for the female DNA, this is interesting.
Remember what that person said? He said through the female DNA, they're a Jew, right? That's what he said, because that's what they were going with. But look what happened when they studied the female DNA.
A startling statement to make, which may be that none of you here who are Ashkenazi Jews may be under the laws of Israel Jewish. That is true by DNA, and this is going to present some fascinating theological problems. The reality of it is that most of female DNA that they've done testing of traces back to European populations. Whether they were pagan or Christian, it's not clear, but they almost certainly were not Semitic. There is a sizable percentage of DNA on the female side that does trace back to the Middle East, but the majority of it traces back to Europe, and seems to indicate that the pattern of Jewish communities, Ashkenazi Jewish communities, was traders or middlemen, nobility aides, whatever, either brought up by the aristocracy or who wandered there because there was a sense of opportunity during brief periods of openness, and they took on local wives. Now, if they went through a formal conversion process, and that's your genetic line, you are Jewish under Israeli law. If they didn't, if they just took a local woman as their wife, and that local woman was pagan or Christian, they didn't go through a formal conversion process, if the rabbis of Israel find out about it, you have a little bit of a problem. The reality of it is that most of us today who are Ashkenazi are probably the descendant of a Semitic Jewish male and either a convert or a Christian or pagan who didn't convert, but quickly was assimilated into the small but soon growing Jewish community, raised their children as Jews, but if you ultimately trace it back, they're not so Jewish.
You heard what he just said there? Understand this. What I just showed you there, you may miss this. This is actually a real genetic study that was done. You can find a lot of information for this. This is a real genetic study that was done. This person, if you look at the lecture, he wasn't even on that. He was on just talking about the real things and some things and whatnot. And look what he actually was trying to say. You know, he was trying to say that the Khazar theory was a myth. In fact, he was exploring the myth of the Khazars. But he said one thing we know is that the DNA of the mother is not connected to the Khazars. Well, let's look at the DNA. One thing that's interesting is that not a lot of people actually understand the DNA of the Khazar father, but we do, because we have the documents of what actually is recorded. So let's go look at those, right? Let's look at those documents. So what did we just confirm here? What did we just confirm here? That Nazi, right? By their mother's line, 100%. They are not Ashkenazi by their mother's line. Do you see how it confirmed that? Let's keep going, because we can actually confirm the father's line too. We can confirm the father's line. In fact, I want you to read this. In fact, I'll read this. I'll read this for the sake of understanding. Watch what it says here. It says, in the region, Jews were found to be more closely related to groups in the north of the Fertile Crescent. Where's the Fertile Crescent? What does he mean, the Fertile Crescent? Well, what you're going to see here is a name. We're going to do a names, understanding of history and names. Names like right here, Sumerians and stuff like that, Sumerians, Scythians, all those names. We're going to look at those names and how they're related. We're going to look at that. But this is very important. That's where the Fertile Crescent is. That's where the Fertile Crescent is, which we'll learn a little bit about of the Fertile Crescent and some things there for the sake of understanding. But let's keep looking at this. Watch what it says here. It says, Jews were found to be more closely related to groups in the north of the Fertile. Now look what it says here. Not the south, but the north of the Fertile Crescent. Where's the Fertile Crescent? Right here if you look here, this is actually going to be the Euphrates River. What part is he actually talking about here? Let me open this. I've been wanting to open this for a long time. I want to show you something. First, I want to show you something. I want to show you this. So where's the Euphrates River? Right here. This is where the Euphrates River is. Right here. They're saying from their study, they're not people of the south. They're not people down here. They're saying from the study, they're people up here. In fact, they're people up here at the Caucasus Mountains. These mountains are called sometimes you see it called Caucasian mountains. You see them called the Caucasus Mountains. Well, look at that. This mountain is really interesting because it's separated by a natural border. As you see this mountain, very, very interesting. Very interesting. Very hard to travel through. But that mountain there, basically, it was separating a people up here. And we're going to look at that. So remember, he's saying from this line right here, he's saying that the people that the Jews are related to, because people say Middle East. Yeah, this is the Middle East. But this is not where Israel was, for the sake of understanding. But that's what you're going to see today, that they're more closely related to people up here, not people down here. And we're going to look at that. Let's look at that for the sake of understanding. Watch what it says here. It says, in the region, Jews, and remember, this is the site we're at right here, right? This is a real site. You're getting a screenshot from the site, right? This is the genetic study of the Y chromosome pool of the Jews, right? This is actually the study of it that's talking about the AshkeNazi and all those things. I just want to read you a screenshot here, right? Because we can find it. We can actually find it on the page too. We just have to put certain words down and then we can find them, right? I just want to show that all the same page for the sake of understanding. So find on the page, I'm just going to put Kurd right there. So a more least common word. This one looks a little common, though I may be able to find it. Let's look for a less common word. Maybe crescent, Fertile Crescent. All right. Just scrolling to see if I'll be able to see it in a scroll, because sometimes it's in a scroll. Only reason I want to show you like this, because just in case, if someone says, "Oh, that wasn't there," that's not on that site. That's a screenshot from somewhere else for the sake of understanding. So what I'm gonna do, let me put this here. Should be able to find it like this, and genetic population degree and the north. Let's go up. Let's see if we find it. So you can see it's kind of talking about the same topic. Financial of course is this, that one's good too. But okay, right here. See, Jews were found to be more closely related to groups of the north of the Fertile Crescent, not the south, but the north of the Fertile Crescent. You see what it's saying there? The north. And what people were of the north? The Kurds, the Turks. You hear what that word right there, that Turk? We're going to look at this, and you're going to see that they're indeed this. I'll show you that was from there, for the sake of understanding. It's important because when you look at the DNA, you look at actually where it came from, to understand the truth for the sake of understanding. In fact, it looks like the live is kind of smooth, so I'm going to show you something. I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to show you something now. I just want to show you something very important. If you never heard of this, if you never heard of the Khazar theory or all those things, you are going to be in for a surprise with this note. For this actually is known for the you don't understand why they wanted people to look at the mother line instead of the father line, even though either way of understanding. So we're going to look at this very carefully because this is going to bring a lot of understanding to something of understanding. Down to because we'll understand one part here. We may not go over the whole note today, but I want to show you a very interesting video that I think will open some eyes for the sake of understanding. Let me just go down to one part here, and then one day I'm gonna start from the beginning. We'll go and look at this history from the beginning. But first, in fact, let me go down. Let me actually go down and show you that video of the Fertile Crescent. Why is it important? Why is this important? Because it's telling us they're from the north of the Fertile Crescent, and we have to look at who's at the Fertile Crescent. We have to look at what people and all these things and how they're related. Let's look at this. So this is going to get fairly detailed.
The first civilizations began on a wide, flat plain between two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. These rivers flow from the mountains in present-day Turkey to the Persian Gulf. In ancient times, this area was called Mesopotamia. The name Mesopotamia comes from a Greek word that means land between the rivers. Mesopotamia is part of a larger region called the Fertile Crescent. This land stretches from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. The Fertile Crescent is where the first farming communities were developed. According to
see this name right here? Very important name right there. We're going to look at that.
many scholars, a group of people known as Sumerians migrated.
You heard what it just said there? Who migrated there? The Sumerians, right? Very important. All these things are very important. The Sumerians. Remember that. We're going to look at those.
To Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. The land they settled in became known as Sumer. Mesopotamia.
So that's all I want you to see there, just to get that confirmation there. Now let me go to a note. The reason why I want to show you a note, because after doing a lot of research, I just noted a couple of names. And the reason why I want to note these names is because it's interesting that they changed their names so often. Yet throughout history, they were known. They were well known because there were certain recorders, such as Rome was a recorder of recording history. The Persians recorded history. The Assyrians, they recorded history, over 300,000 or 30,000 different recordings of history for the sake of understanding. But let me go to something here. I want you to see something because it's very important to hear this. We're going to look at something here and look at how this is all important and connected for the sake of understanding. But let me go to a certain thing here which has the name. So I want you to see that part right here. The reason why I want you to look at this is because you're going to see common names, right? You're going to see Summer right here. You're going to see this name. You're going to see Sumerians. You're going to see that name right there, this one. Not that one. You're going to see that one too, but you'll see Sumerians. You're going to see all these names, Kimmery. You're going to see this, Scythians, these names right here. All these names you shall see. You're going to see these names, and you're going to see see how it all lines up, how all these things line up. So Gog Turks, see that word Gog Turks right there? We're going to look at that, the Gog Turks, and how, because some people, when you hear the word, if you're familiar with this, you know that many people say the Jewish people are Khazars. Well, from their origin, the actual origin. As we know, Khazar is not in the Bible. Therefore, we have to go further than that. We have to go further than just that. And it begins understanding the Turks. So remember, it said genetically they are related to the Turks for the sake of understanding. And what you're going to see is a really interesting documentary. I want to show you a documentary of the rise of the Turks for the sake of understanding. And let's go down a little bit. I'm going to go to that one so you can see that. So the Gog Turks. The Gog Turks, for the sake of understanding. Remember where this... Now, before I go down to that, you just seen in this area around this area, for the sake of understanding, this is where they begin, right? They was in, and this is very common. You understand this. Why do they call it the Fertile Crescent? Because all the nations actually started off around here, not down here. Not some people, scientists will tell you they start in Africa. They got the out of Africa idea. No, they actually started up here. How do we know? Because the Garden of Eden was there. The Garden of Eden was there because, as we know, the Euphrates River. Now you got more pure race over here, and the reason why is because a lot of them up here was still mixing, especially the ones up here. They was mixing highly. A lot of them was mixing with each other, for the sake of understanding. It was only to when you get the time of Israel, when Israel gets about here and the Lord preserves their seed. He preserves them in this area, for the sake of understanding. But we're going to look at that. The names that we want to look at here is here. Look where this is at. I want you to see where this is at. Remember this. Look at the names you see here. Scythians and Sumerians, right? You see these two names? Notice the location. You see this location right here? This is that location of the mountains that I was showing you on that right here. Let me go back to here and show you that. This is the location that we're looking at. This is where the Sumerians were, right? The Scythians, they were up here. This is that mountain area, right? That division mountain. You'll remember because you'll know Turkey's right here, right? That division mountain right there. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to that note. So you see this line right here. This is where that barrier would be, right? And so you'll have these ones up here, and you'll see these ones over here. So now let's look at this information on the Gog Turks. It's going to be very interesting for the sake of understanding. So tomorrow we'll go over this, but first I want to show you a quick historical interesting thing for the sake of understanding, because the idea of where they came from is from the Khazars, right? In fact, these are the ones that converted. They know that they converted Caucasian mountains right here. This is why, you see sometimes people are called Caucasian, because that means they're just higher than the mountains. They're higher than the Caucasian mountains. So that's why a lot of times they be called it. But you can see all these are actually related. Pontus, Khazaria, all these are going to be basically of the same people. But we're gonna see a video of the So I'm going to jump ahead. One day I'm going to show the whole thing, but I'm going to jump ahead and just show a little bit, because this part is important at the end. Let me just start here.
Fighting and was replaced by.
So what's important to understand is that the Gog Turks, they was half European, half Asian, for the sake of understanding. But they end up getting into it with most of the Asians, like where we see like the China that started to grow later on. They got into it with them, and they actually were forced this way, right? They were forced this way, for the sake of understanding. And this part, just this short part, you're going to see, and then it's going to talk about those different parts that the Gog Turks. Think about that, Gog Turks, for the sake of understanding, Gog.
Turkic Uyghur Khaganate, the Gurk Turks' greatest legacy would not be their conquest and plunder.
You see how big they are? Notice how big they are, and notice this area right here. This area right here is what we want to look at. This is the area that we want to look at right here. And watch who is going to be here, the Khazars.
Accumulated, but their language, culture, and
so you're going to see, this is the original group. You're going to see what groups came from this one group. Watch what happens here.
That spread and multiplied. The Uyghur, Khazar, Karkanids.
You heard what it just said there? Let me go back.
Legacy would not be their conquest and plunder they accumulated, but their language, culture, and people that spread and multiplied. The Uyghur, Khazar.
You see what happened here? From the Gog Turks came the Khazars. You see what has happened here? See, look how far they went. You see this? Let's go back. Let's go back. Let's look at this. Not this. Let's go back to here. This area right here is where they were. Do you know that there are names of their villages around here? Now, you're not going to find it on any modern map, but it is known by someone who studied linguistics, studying the area. They actually found the locations of the names, for the sake of understanding. They found a location of names, for the sake of understanding. And you can see a lot of times they'll try to shrink their kingdom to like this. A lot of times on maps, You got to be careful looking on the map. So sometimes like this, like, sometimes it's shrunken, but actually they had a lot of control of these areas. So you can see they stretched down here. These all had an alliance together. In fact, you're going to see a lot of confederacies. You're going to see. If you don't know what confederacy is, it's just basically a bunch of smaller groups or larger groups banding together, for the sake of understanding. This is a study of the linguistics. What you see right here. Remember what that other study said? It said that their seed was above the Fertile Crescent, right? It said it was north of the Fertile Crescent, right? So that's where they found them all at. And guess what they also found here? They found villages. In fact, they found well-known villages that are actually documented. Let's go up and look at that for the sake of understanding. If that's down, so let's down here. Let's go down a little bit. Right here. So now I talked about this before, that the study of linguistics, there's 3 different people that studied this, and they found out it landed around the same areas. And these areas have cities or little towns that were named AshkeNazi. This right here is just a way of saying AshkeNazi for the sake of understanding, which, if you remember, the Jews don't just call themselves Jews, right? There's a word they also call themselves. They call themselves AshkeNazi. Why? Why? I would call yourself another people, for the sake of understanding. That's kind of like, let's say if I was a Shemite, right? That's like me calling myself an Egyptian, right? Now, someone else calling you Egyptian, like Moses never said that. He never went around saying, I am an Egyptian. But these ones are going around large flocks, large groups, saying that they are Ashkenaz. And you're going to see the connection. You're going to see the actual real connection here. And what I just showed you a little bit of genetic studies, but I'm going to show you in history. I'm going to show you actually in history that their location is correct. You can know them by their works. Let's look at their works real fast. I want to show you something. I already showed that the Rothschilds, they are Ashkenazi, which is well known today. The Rothschilds are Ashkenazi. They found an old book from them. And what you're going to see here, this is very important. The reason why this is important because you can find, if you pay attention to their art, same ones. And the reason how we know is because there's concepts here that we need to understand. A little bit of that. Now, I already reviewed this. As always, this channel is PG. Try to keep it safe, well, PG-13, for the sake of understanding. But let's look at. I want you to see something interesting in this book. The reason why I want you to see this is because this is not Israelite art. This is not what you're seeing here. Is not Israelite art. This is actually barbarian art. In fact, once I show you a little video, you're gonna see that all this is the barbarians' work. All this is the barbarians' work. In fact, from the villages, the design of the villages, all these things. These are things that, and understand this book, 14th century book. This book this is a Yiddish book, which is also a language that, in fact, this was in 1479, for the sake of understanding. And the art on this is when they put this art in. Obviously, this one will be a copy of a restorated copy, for the sake of understanding. But the art, look at what's going on here, for the sake of understanding. You can see with this hat. Very interesting type of hat. Why do they have a hat like that? Why do they have shoes like that? For the sake of understanding, you're going to see some interesting things. You're going to see some very interesting things when I show you, for the sake of understanding. But this is not Israelite art, right? This is not stuff that you will see common in Israel, such as things like this, right? What's going on here, right? It's very important. The design on the shield, different things like that. Those aren't things that were something you can see. The beheading, this is going to be common. When you see who they are, you're going to understand that this is actually them. This is actually them all day. But let me go to that and actually show you who they are, for the sake of understanding. And then you're going to understand this strange art. Why would a man be with an angel? So this is some strange stuff, but I'm going to go up and I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you now who they are, for the sake of understanding. You may have heard of the barbarians, right? You may have heard of the barbarians. If you never heard of the barbarians, there's a lot of things going on right now with a lot of people finding out who the barbarians are. There's a lot of Netflix. They're going deep into history. And this History Channel is doing a lot of deep history on the barbarians. They got some series and stuff for that. So they're really doing a lot of information giving for the barbarians, for the sake of understanding. So a lot of this is not really mysteries, but you're going to see you're going to see what actually these people are for the sake of understanding. But let me go and find the perfect start for you. Let me go and find that. Let's see. Right. This one is okay. I'm not going to go to this one, though. Let's see. Not that one. And not this one. But let's see. If it's not this one, then let's look.
The Turkic peoples are most well.
This one is good too. I'm just gonna type it down. I'm gonna show you. All right, right here. I want to show you this. So just listen to the title. You hear what it says here? Origin of the Germanic tribes. You heard what it just said there? This is where you're gonna get Germany. You hear what it's saying there? You're going to get Germany there. Let me just show you a map real fast before I show you this. Let me go back, and I'm going to show you what's going to happen. Let's go down. So you see what caused that? They expand, they out. Right? They pushed out this way. You're going to see that later on from the Khazars. You're going to see, you can see a lot of places where they are. You're going to see that this is going to become Germany for the sake of understanding. In fact, I'm going to show you a quote, how we know they became Germany, because you see this right here, Germany, right here. This is what, and understand, Rome, they couldn't push them out. They was too strong. They couldn't push them out. Rome was another part. Germany was another part, for the sake of understanding. But let's go up. I just want to show you something, because this is going to be one of those things that, as I said, once you understand this, you're going to understand that these people have been known. I'm going to show you a book. This was written in, let me make sure I say the date right, 1706. You can see this is actually a book. This is a real book. You can see it. I'm going to click it right here. Already on my, right here. So just to show you, is a real book right here. This is the book. And this is the book right here. You can flip through it yourself, and you can see the different things here. That's a copy. It talks about the antiquities of the nations of the Celtics and Gauls, for the sake of understanding. Ancient British. Let's go back. So let's look. I want you to hear this. This is what it says. Because just understand, some of the F's look like F's. So forgive me if I mess up. Some of these F's look like F's. So this is so that it may be said that Asia was the cradle of the human race. Why does he mean the cradle of the human race? Remember we looked at that? The Fertile Crescent, right? Asia was the cradle of the human race, right? And their original country. See what it's saying there? It is from, watch what it says here. It is from, and remember, this is before the genetic study, right? This is in 1706, right? Watch what it says here. It is from thence those swarms came. What swarms? The swarms that is actually talking about following, the AshkeNazi. Watch what it says here. It was from thence those swarms came, which filled Germany, right? And other western and northern countries. Watch what it says here. And here you must know that the Hebrews, at least, that's what that means, at least the modern Jews believe that the owed their origin to him who in scripture is called Ashkenaz. This is in 1706, for the sake of understanding, right? Say they were Ashkenazi over there, who was the son of Gomer, right? And frequently the grandson of Japheth, for the sake of understanding. Then Gomer brought Ashkenaz. So yeah, Ashkenaz, his grandfather would be Japheth. And hence it is that when they speak of the, I might butcher this word, I keep getting this word wrong, Teutons or Germans, they call them Ashkenazim in their language. You see what it's saying there? Or Alkanazim in their language, for the sake of understanding, because of L there. But do you see what you're seeing here? This is in 17. Now you understand what happens here. It's really interesting.
Of these barbarians, the Romans did battle with over the centuries.
Remember, so for some reason I can't see comments on this thing like this. I don't know why it's like that, but let me look on the other phone just to see how everyone's doing. Just go and take a look here, see how everyone's doing. If you have any questions, let me know. What you're about to see is where they came from. That the Sumerians and all that, and then the Khazars, where they came from. It's for the barbarians. Watch what happens here. It's really interesting. And watch you'll understand.
Of Europe as the of antiquity and ushering in the Middle Ages. In this video, we will shine the spotlight on them, exploring their culture and society, while telling the history of the earliest origins of the ancient Germanic peoples, the greatest enemy of Rome. Shout out to Netflix and its new historical TV series, Barbarians, for sponsoring this video. Barbarians is a brand new TV.
See what I'm saying here? This is one of those series that they have going on and whatnot. I'm just going to skip it.
They are ancestrally related to many peoples in today, integrated with, and most importantly, made war on.
So basically, for the sake of what's the word? Stalemate here.
Broadly, they are ancestrally many people in Europe today, including Dutch, Austrians, Flemish, Swedes, Norwegians, Danes, and of course, the modern Germans.
What you're going to find out is that all these are the same people. We're going to look at that tomorrow. All of these are the same people, for the sake of understanding. And you're going to see that they're related to other groups as well.
Of whom are speakers of modern Germanic dialects. In 98 AD, the historian Tacitus completed a book titled De Origine et Situ Germanorum, more commonly known as Germania, a Roman survey of the history and culture of their Germanic foes. This tome provides us with the most valuable window into Germanic culture, and will be referred to throughout this video. Let us begin with a quote. Undivided Germany is separated from the Gauls and Pannonians by the rivers Rhine and Danube, from the Sarmatians and Dacians by mutual fear of mountains, and the rest of it is surrounded by ocean. As for the Germans themselves, I should suppose them to be native to the area. Who would have left Asia or Africa or Italy to look for Germany? With its wild scenery and harsh climate, it is pleasant neither to live in nor look upon, unless it
very important to understand
be one's home.
You heard what it just said in his writing? It said they came from Asia, right? Because it's important to understand genetics also proved this, that they came from the Fertile Crescent. And then they actually migrated, for the sake of understanding. That's what they're saying. They migrated here because they wasn't here at first. Understand that. It was empty, about empty, for the sake of understanding. And then these ones had moved their way over here. And we're going to look at that.
As condescending as his account is, Tacitus was not entirely incorrect. By his time, the various Germanic tribes had been living in their traditional territories for at least a millennium or two. However, their true origins are a little more complex than the chronicler suggests.
What location is he lighting up here? Because linguistics. You see that? You see what this area is? Remember, we looked at this with that mountain there, the Caucasus Mountains, right? The Khazars, who later became who's known as the Khazars, for the sake of understanding, but came from the Gog Turks, right? The Gog Turks. Let's proceed.
And the key to understanding it lies in linguistics. The Germanic languages are part of the Indo-European linguistic family, and therefore share a common ancestor with almost all of the languages of Europe, Northern India, and Western Asia.
You heard what it just said there? It's saying they have a common ancestor, right? That's what you just seen there, that it said they were related to the Turks.
As of now, the leading idea is the Kurgan hypothesis, which postulates that the Proto-Indo-European language was spoken by a nomadic Europid people who inhabited the Pontic steppe from at least the 6th millennium BC.
Why do they call them Indo-European? You know why they call them Indo-European? Because you know how people talk about gatherers, hunter and gatherers, and then
first as food and later as transportation. Around the 4th millennium BC, these pastoralists are said to have utilized the advantage given to them by their four-legged friends to expand out of their steppe homeland and across a huge swath of the Eurasian landmass, displacing or intermixing with the indigenous peoples already living there. Over many centuries, the Proto-Indo-European tongue spoken by these various branches of Yamnaya migrants gave rise to the early versions of Greek, Latin,
See those names?
Sanskrit, and of course, German. Proto-Germanic languages and cultures were said to have emerged as a distinct branch of Indo-European during the Bronze Age, contained to the northern coast of modern Germany, the Jutland Peninsula, and the southern tip of Sweden. In the late Iron Age, they expanded from the Rhine to the Vistula rivers, bordering the Celtic peoples to the west, and the Scytho-Sarmatian horse lords to the east. Early Germanic society was predominantly rural. Unlike their
You know what they said there? Their society was mostly like farming. Understand that. Their life was mostly like farming.
Indian European ancestors, they mostly lived sedentary lives in small to mid-sized villages. The economy of these villages revolved mainly around the rearing of goats, sheep, and cattle, and the cultivation of grain.
Now ask yourself, is this how Israel lived? No. How did Israel live? They were centered around Jerusalem, for the sake of understanding. There's a center around that is related to this type of lifestyle.
Ample They were never a single nation, and instead a spectrum of many independent tribes with similar but differing cultures and languages. Among these were larger confederations, like the Swebi, Marcomanni, and Alemanni. And
you see what I'm saying here? These are what confederations are. You see, they were used to having confederations, for the sake of understanding.
The political map of ancient Germania was ever shifting, as independent factions splintered out of larger tribes. Larger tribes swallowed up smaller tribes, and loosely organized alliances came together and fell apart. As one can imagine, these factions were all highly martial in nature. Tacitus claimed that while kingship in Germania was determined by bloodline, it was the subordinate war leaders who were the real power in their tribe. In turn, the war leaders only remained in power as long as they could continue to deliver victories for their people, and were promptly ousted if they showed cowardice or incompetence. Let us now expand on what this warrior culture looks like. Unlike the chariot riders of Gaul to their west, and the mounted archers of Sarmatia to their
skip a little bit. It just talks about how their leaders had armor and the people
in which
had
was a
basically
like the bellicose, which required.
So you see how they basically were like barbarians. Just talks about how their leaders had armor. They were skilled with armor and they had horses, but the people were basically like they had leather around their waist and they would have basically nothing, no shirt pretty much, and they would have spears and shields. That's why they called them barbarians when they came.
Iron to forge. Oval or rectangular shields, in which was embedded a hard iron shield boss, which could be used to bash the enemy to deal blunt force damage. However, what the Germanic peoples lacked in equipment, they made up with ferocious and fearless fighting. Tacitus remarked on their stigma of spinelessness with grim commentary. Traitors and deserters are hung from trees. Cowards and poor fighters are plunged into the mud of the marshes with a herd.
What does this remind you of?
Over their heads.
They said, basically what he said, they traitors they'll hang. And it says anyone who was scared or had a basket on their head, probably like a custom made basket on their head for the sake of understanding. But you see what's going on here? You see this imagery? Now, the reason why this is known because they're talking about that's how actual ways. Those were the things that they were familiar with. That's what's interesting because when you look at this book, you'll see some of their culture there. You'll see their culture because that's how it would be. If you use drawings, you're able to find someone's culture by drawings. Drawings is you can find someone's culture. You can find a little bit about their lifestyle. You may not understand the words, like this is Yiddish. You may not understand what's being said here, but you can understand by the imagery for the sake of understanding. You can see here is just having some dinners and stuff like that, people eating. for the sake of understanding. Nothing to see. But then you get some stranger imagery later on. You get some very strange imagery. Very, very interesting. You see some animals eating other animals, and you see people hunting each other on horseback. On horseback, right? They're hunting each other on horseback for the sake of understanding. Very interesting. They're fighting on horseback, which they are known for. These are people who are actually known for that. Very strange. Doesn't seem like something a rabbi would put on in their book for anything like that. But yet, that's what this is supposed to be. This is supposed to be one of those Yiddish books for the sake of understanding. In fact, I'll play this little video so you can hear a little bit about this thing. Very, very interesting. Israeli Museum. You can see where it's saying detailed landscapes and human figures, all those things and whatnot, as you can see. See, a lot of strange imagery going on. So now let's move forward. Let's look in this. I just want to show you a specific picture here. Besides this, even though this is so strange, and this is part of their culture for the sake of understanding. But let's keep going. You see this right here? You remember this? Let's just go over here. This is a thing that they were doing, right? Understand this. So you can see an idea of their culture here. The brutalness, you're going to see some of the brutalness done here. You're going to see some of those things for the sake of understanding. We're going to keep going. You can see some strange imagery, just like I talked about that. Remember, we're also going to talk about how they converted. So that's why you'll see a lot of these writings and things like that, because they converted for the sake of understanding. We're going to take a look at some of those things for the sake of understanding. So you can just get an idea of some of the things that was commonly with them, right? Just like that. Very strange stuff is going on there for the sake of understanding. But let's go. Let's go and see the rest of this, because when you see the rest, you're going to understand a little more. You understand a little more about them. So let's keep going.
Despite the bellicose nature of the Germanic peoples, there were active or non-violent diplomacy among them. The most prominent of these were the great intertribal gatherings known as hustings, or simply as the
I just
Thing.
want you to see that.
According to Tacitus, these assemblies would take place only when the moon was neither new strong
idolatry, but I'm gonna go to a different one for you. I want to now show you something else. I'm just gonna close these. I'll leave that one. I'll just leave that one. All right, let's turn this a little bit. All right, so let's go up. I want to tell you about this, the Talmud, right? The Talmud and all that stuff right there. I'm going to click this. I want to give you a little history on this thing for the sake of understanding, right? It was something that obviously was hated. It was something that, obviously seeing what was in it, it was abominable. They had an event that happened when they burned it. I just want to read you this event. Very, very interesting event for the sake of understanding. You can see it was something that was cited, but it was talking about basically the burning of the Talmud in Paris for the sake of understanding. Very interesting, because what we actually know is that this actually was something that was going on during the time when they was actually in the land. So what they would try to tell you, what a lot of them would try to tell you, is that this Talmud was something that was with them for a long time. Most likely not. In fact, the rising of this Talmud, when we actually look at some of the things that happen in this Talmud, it has a bunch of things that are false. In fact, I just want to read you an interesting quote. Well, not a quote, but a phrase here, right? It was new and false law, that of the Talmud. You see what it's saying there? And guess what time? Person to, if I can move this. Let me go back. Okay. For some reason. No. The reason why I want to show you this, because this in 70 AD was not. We don't hear Messiah ever talk about anything like this for the sake of understanding. He will talk about the teaching of the Pharisees, but don't get that twisted with the Talmud for the sake of understanding. The teaching of the Pharisees was the add-ons that they were doing, kind of like they were basically certain things. I don't know if I'm saying it. Against us, I'm going to butcher that last name. Basically, that person. It says a Jewish physician, you see what it's saying there, and scholar who converted to Christianity in 1106. So this person converted to Christianity in 1106 and was formerly known as Moses something, right? Leaving Spain, he eventually lived in England and then France. The first section of his dialogue against the Jews attacks Judaism, right? Against the Jews, attacks Judaism to a great extent by challenging, basically these people, for the sake of understanding. Whereas, watch what it says here, previous claims have been that the Jews continued to practice biblical law, refusing to accept Christianity, right? But notice what this person was going to talk about here, because what we're going to do, we're going to look at this. Petrus now claimed that the Jews were following what? See how he's saying that? He's saying he's now claiming that, for the sake of understanding. He's saying he's now claiming that the Jews were following. Open that again. I don't know. Look it again. I don't know. Go down. What he said was a new. You see what he's saying there? So he didn't see this when he came out. This was a Judean that left Spain, and he said that Talmud. He's saying this was new. This was something that he wasn't familiar with, and the thing because they had they were burning this. History for understanding. For the sake, because the origin of Yiddish about 1000 AD. For the understanding, it started to come when they converted. They changed their language a little bit. That's why Yiddish is not Hebrew. It's not for the sake of understanding. In fact, what it is for the sake of understanding, which is why linguistics connected together. But let's for the sake of understanding, I'm gonna. But let me go up, because now I just thought of something I want to show you. I just thought of something that's very important for me to show you this for the sake of understanding. So tomorrow I'm gonna go over this very slowly, very carefully. But let's go up a little bit. I want to show you something. Go up a little bit. Let's see, where is it? This example, isn't that? I'll show you a certain video here. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is.
The Khazarian Empire.
This one's kind of quiet, so I'm going to see if I turn it all the way up.
Elites converted to Judaism. Many other people converted at the same time, including Slavs and other people who wanted to take part of this Jewish trade.
This one is very important to see. Well, it's more important to see something now.
Slavic version.
It's important that I show you something else before I show you this. which is, you know, that I think I saw it right under there, but I'm gonna grab it here. It's right. It's this video right here. I'm gonna click it and show you this.
Conquest of the Western region.
Did you know that it was commonly known of the conversion of them? Now this is an interesting one. The whole thing is really interesting, but there's a certain part I want to show you here. That's why I want to go to it on my note to show you a certain here for this understanding, which probably should this first. That's why tomorrow when I go over this, I'm gonna start from the beginning, from the Sumerians and how they slowly changed to who they are. Now remember how it said they came for the sake of understanding. Very important. But let me go and actually go to that. I want you to see that one. Go to the video here. Very, very interesting, this one. Go up a little bit. So we just looked at the Gog Turks, and there's a certain family in the Gog Turks and things like that. Very, very interesting stuff. But what I want to show you here, go up a little bit. They had blocked one video, but that's all right. I'm going to go up actually down here. Right. This one is one that they had blocked for some reason. But I want to show you something here. 50 or 5 minutes, 5-minute mark.
Peoples out and drove the remainder west, where they possibly became the Pannonian Avars. The Göktürk Khaganate was born. Jina clan, with Bumin as its first high ruler. The founder's reign was not an extensive one, as he died in the same year, to be succeeded by a son known as Quolo, who ruled only for a scant few months before he too died.
So remember, we learned about the Gog Turks.
Quolo's successor, Muhan, did not die immediately, becoming Khagan in late 553 and quickly eradicating any remnant of the old Roran. The gigantic nature of the Göktürk realm meant it could...
See the area where they are? Remember this area? See where that side right there? See these things? Very important to understand. See this area? Very important.
Not be managed from one single location by just one single man. So, an informal division of power occurred, in which the late Bumin's brother, known as Istami, would rule the western segment of the Khaganate as a Yab.
Just
Muhan ruled.
It splits. It does a split there.
Them was
so you can see they split.
In our episode on the White Hun state,
right
tribes which would eventually give their name to the modern nation-state of Kyrgyzstan.
You heard what I just said there? You heard what it just took there? Kyrgyzstan, right? Kyrgyzstan. Very important. Kyrgyzstan. So you're seeing the growth of a nation. Watch what happens here.
Of Islam and in more detail because they dealt with the record-keeping civilizations of the West more frequently, such as Eastern Rome and the Persians. As we discussed in our episode on the White Huns, it was a deadly alliance between the Göktürk Yabgu Istami and Persian Shah Khosrau, which eventually crushed the once hegemonic Hephthalite Empire between 557 and 561, finally bringing about a common border between the two states. All seemed well and peaceful, but then, sometime before 568, the Turks sent a commercial expedition of Sogdian merchants, led by a man named Manyak, to Persia, in order to request permission to sell Göktürk-acquired silk in the Sassanid Empire. In essence, the Turks wanted to usurp control of the ever-lucrative silk trade, which had previously been dominated.
You heard what he just said there? Silk trade, right? Silk trade, for the sake of understanding, let me go up a little bit. This is actually what they were known for. They were known for the silk trade, for the sake of understanding. And that's where they are actually known to be around. That's why back then, the converted Jews, they were well known with being merchants. That's why a lot of times you'll see a lot of play when people calls that they make fun of them and all that stuff, and then they'll say like, oh, they love money or stuff like that. Because by the 8th century, the word Jew and merchant was, for the sake of understanding, it was one of those things that, in fact, you can see like some of the structures, some of the what going up there, had like different languages and different things like that. So there's just a idea of some things that were going on for understanding. But let's continue.
By the Hephthalites. The Persians purchased the silk, but then, in what was intended as an offensive gesture, intentionally burned it in front of the merchants. This was the start of trouble for both peoples. In a second attempt to open relations, the Turks sent another mission to Persia. This time, an annoyed his
for the sake of understanding, it just talks about
them in 5.
It just talks about how the Turks were going at it with the Persians.
58. Emissary to the Roman turn of the Avar.
You see this where they came from? They got some of this area. They went around. You're going to see some of these things later on.
Who had not yet submitted, and a trade alliance with the Romans. In the year 568, Maniac, now serving as an emissary to the Romans, brought a more substantial trade delegation and was received
they also got involved with the Romans
by Emperor Justin II, who was extremely interested in this new enemy of Persia because his empire also was an enemy of Persia. On the return journey, Maniac was accompanied by a Byzantine counter-embassy led by a strategos named Symmachos, which was well received by the ruling Turkic chief. A later embassy in 572 was more bitterly received, as the Romans were accused of harboring the fugitive Avars, who the Turks considered their own rebellious subjects. The 19-year-long reign of Kagan Muhan ended in that same year, and left the throne to his brother Taspar. Taspar soon converted to Buddhism, which was one of the most successful proselytizing faiths in Central Asia, and was later
because you don't need to see all that. Just
made their home or Khaganate for him. Attempt to quit when of the
skip a little bit.
Written to Byzantine Emperor Maurice, declaring himself the Lord of the Seven Races, Master of the Seven Climes. Unfortunately, he disappears from history entirely in 603, never to be seen again. This emergence of the Ashina clan-led Turks onto the scene in their more overt, dominant form essentially made Turkic languages and culture hegemonic on the steppe. Moreover, the sheer military power wielded by the Göktürk Khagans was unmatched since the days of the ancient Xiongnu, and would not be equaled again until the great Mongol conquests. Perhaps the most enduring impact on and of the Turks would be their relation to Islam. Within a short time of the Muslim conquests, numerous steppe Turks brought to prominence by the Göktürks would convert to the new faith, and eventually become crucial factors in the Muslim world, ending up as Mamluk slave soldiers, and eventually rising to create Turkic dynasties of their own, such as the Ghaznavids and eventually the Seljuks. But that
very, very important to understand. Very related. They're very closely related for the sake of understanding. A lot of them who are Turks or the Turkey, like when you look in the area of Turkey, a lot of them who are
finally the far western fringe. The
heard what I just said there. This after the fall.
Continue talking about steppe civilizations, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters and channel members who make the creation of our videos possible. Now you can also.
I want to show you, for the sake of understanding, at least until tomorrow. I want to show you one more thing. Because I think it's important to know what they look like, to know what they actually describe them, what they look like. That's what you see there. You're gonna see what they actually look like. You're gonna see word for word what they actually look like. I'm gonna go down and I'm gonna show you where they say what they look like for the sake of understanding. Just go down to a certain part here so you can see this. Go down here. So we're gonna look at this note tomorrow, y'all willing. But let's go down and let's see how they looked. I just want to show you that. Just making sure that's not the spot. Let's see. Let me see if I can find it on the note. Right here. All right. So it's going to be 8:45. So I want to show you what they look like.
The Caucasus. In
So this is a
720
really good video. Khazar history of the Jewish Turks. Very interesting because it's well known. But I want to show you what they actually look like. See the Khazar?
by recent successes in the war, the Khazars invaded Muslim lands in modern
Now pay attention.
Azerbaijan in 730, led by Bajik, probably a son of the Kurgan.
Okay, so watch what happens here. Watch what happens here. Very important. The Khazars, you may remember this. In fact, that you may understand this. The Gogs, the Khazars, who are the AshkeNazi, they're constantly at war with Islam, right? The Arabs, for the sake of understanding. It's not because it's Jew versus Arab, but it's because they've been at war, and you're going to see this. Watch what happens here.
He seems to have been a traditionally merciless steppe warlord who callously ordered his heavily armored, light-skinned, red-haired and blue-eyed Khazar cavalry forces to slay any Muslim they came across.
You heard what it just said there? What did he say that they look like? Just pay attention to the term that they're saying here. The actual things that they're saying, how they look, for the sake of understanding.
Lands in modern Azerbaijan in 730, led by Bajik, probably a son of Kurgan. He seems to have been a traditionally merciless steppe warlord who callously ordered his heavily armored, light-skinned, red-haired and blue-eyed Khazar cavalry forces.
You heard what he just said? They look like light-skinned, blue-eyed, red hair, for the sake of understanding. Very important to understand that. Light-skinned, blue-eyed, red hair. Well, that's great to know that because that's original characteristics, which is recorded. It's recorded to how they looked. That's very important. Why? Because there's some mixed. That's a different story. You know, we can find out the ones that mix. We can look at the ones that mix. That's well known, and we can look at them. We can look at the picture, get a good look at the picture, and you can see some got that Asian type look for the sake of understanding, because that's where they came from for the sake of understanding. But that certain group that had split later on was called that Khazar. That's the ones that converted. That's where you're going to see a lot of those ones that were called AshkeNazi for the sake of understanding. Which I'm going to click one of these and see if this is the one that I want to look at here. This one is one study. Let's see. Let's grab this one. So it just goes into a little information on like some genetics and different things like that. And about, you know, where it came from, different things like that. But one way we can do this, we can do it. Oh, there it was. Right there. So look, you can get an idea. So what did it say that they look like? It said they had red hair, blue eyes, right? Red hair, blue eyes. You can see that. Red hair, blue eyes. Red hair, blue eyes. I don't know. You kind of gotta look very closely. Maybe you can kind of tell. And understand that for the sake of understanding, right? So I just want to show you that a lot of these things are confirmed in history. It's confirmed in so many different ways for the sake of understanding. It's things that we know. These are things that we know for the sake of understanding. So the Khazars had light-skinned blue eyes, right? So that's what the original Khazars would look like. They would look like they had light skin and blue eyes for the sake of understanding. It's not common. In fact, you can look it up yourself. I don't know how to word it. People with red hair. You know, you can look it up. Percentage of people with red hair. And what does it tell us? 2%. How much percentage of people are Ashkenazi? About 2%, for the sake of understanding. But understand this. This is one of those things that we ourselves have to consider. Similarity like this, we have to understand that this is important. It's because this is the Illuminati. This is who you call the Illuminati. But you have to pay attention. This is that they're not enlightened. this. They expect the people at this point to be not really caring for who is who, for the sake of but I had talked about this before, right? We know what the Romans look like. If I was to put a full cast of people with darker skin as the Romans, dark skin, brown, black hair, black eyes, right? Dark complexion. A lot of people wouldn't like that. They wouldn't like the Romans to be a different color. So how are we changing the Judeans to a different color? Understand this. The way they looked is known through history. But this is important. This is important because if we understand this, we'll actually have information to things that were forgotten for the sake of understanding. Let's go to 10:15 or 10:50 on this for the sake of understanding. Let's go to 10:50 on this. Let's go to 10:50 here.
Took power in 750.
Right here.
To hear of it again. On the operational scale, matters were inconclusive, but on the grand strategic scale, Islam's titanic pincer movement had been halted
now, obviously, they lost.
in the east by the Khazars and in the west by the Franks at almost the same time. It was the end of Umayyad expansionary efforts against the Khazars, and even the end of an Umayyad caliphate, as the less expansionist Abbasids took power in 750. Rather than going into more of the military and politics of the Khazars, we'll instead discuss two things that they are known for above all others: their religion and their trade. Unlike the vast majority of empires in Eurasia at the time, and perhaps having converted in roughly the year 740, though the date is a matter of scholarly debate. What was the reason for this, and how did it come to pass? At the beginning of the 8th century, the Mediterranean world was polarized primarily between Christianity and Islam, faiths which served almost as the religious arm of their respective realms and would inevitably be used to gain political domination over the newly converted. The Khazar Empire was a powerful realm of its own, which represented a third force, and had proved itself a diplomatic and military equal to the Caliphate and the Empire, even having placed their own candidate on the Roman throne. Yet, interacting with these sophisticated civilizations had made Khazar rulers realize that their Tengriist shaman beliefs could not grant spiritual, legal, and dynastic legitimacy like the great monotheistic faiths could. However, the Khazars could not accept Christianity or Islam. Accepting conversion to either superpower's religion would automatically subordinate Khazars to either the emperor or the caliph. So, it seemed like the only logical choice was to, as the third major power, choose the third major religion, which did not have as many strings attached: Judaism. How this happened isn't entirely certain. There was no momentous event like Rome's Battle of the Milvian Bridge, for example, which eventually led to the empire's conversion to Christianity. However, there are certain trends which can explain why it happened when it did. Even before the Khazar ruling caste put Tengriism aside, the Northern Kingdom, as Byzantium called it, had extensive connections with Jews and their religious practices. There were old prominent Jewish communities on the Crimean and Taman peninsulas, which had existed ever since Greek and Roman times, living in cities such as Panticapaeum and Phanagoria. External events in the early 700s were to increase the Jewish presence in Khazaria to an unprecedented degree. Persecution of Jews in the Byzantine Empire began in the reign of Justinian, but particularly intensified under the reigns of Heraclius and Leo III, the Isaurian, the latter of whom sought to forcibly baptize and thus convert Jewish citizens to Christianity in 722. While Leo's decree was not effectively enforced, the policy led many Jews to flee from Byzantium and into Khazar lands, including from Roman possessions in Crimea. Simultaneously, the Jews also migrated into Khazaria from the Muslim world, but in far smaller numbers. The refugees which fled to Khazar lands represented themselves as bearers of an old, sophisticated, ancient culture, and were almost definitely a key factor in creating a cosmopolitan outlook of tolerance in Atil, the Khazar capital, which Arab travelers admired. It can also be speculated that Jewish missionary refugees, who also brought Byzantine arts, crafts, and superior methods of agriculture and trade, probably used this influence to persuade the inner Khazar tribes of the political and spiritual advantages of conversion to the neutral Judaism. Whatever the case...
Now, just for the sake of understanding, a small group of actual Judeans actually taught them, for the sake of understanding. But let's look at this group of people that converted, right? Israel, it's going to be much smaller for the sake of understanding. A smaller area for the sake of understanding. Mainly like this area right here, where Israel will be. They would have the Khazarian Empire, which would reign from here, right? And then all the way pretty much right here, about here, for the sake of understanding. Now their reach, if they reached all the way over here, if they reach all the way over here, it's actually known that they actually owned this sea. They pretty much was controlling a little bit of the sea. Rome was also controlling the sea, but they had a great tie-in together, Rome and the Khazars, for the sake of understanding. What I mean, a great tie-in together. Well, Rome and the Khazars basically had a confederacy, for the sake of understanding. And they had a Khazar get on the throne of Rome, for the sake of understanding. As you can see here, this is a Khazar. His name is Louis IV. Louis IV, as it says right here, Leo IV, for the sake of understanding, the Khazar. This is the Khazar that went to the throne of Rome. Just for the sake of understanding, I have a little video right here at 1910. So for some reason, I don't know why I can't move this thing, but this right here will be Constantine, I believe the 5th or the 6th right there. And then watch the year here. Go up a little more when that one comes in. So you can see this will be the area, right? Rome is right here. So kind of hard to tell, but let me actually make sure I got the timestamp on that. So he would start. So it would be 775. We can go back because I'm pretty sure. Go back a little bit. As soon as I've seen that 775, so right here. So this would be it, right? This would be Constantine V, right there. This would be Constantine V. And then right here, just to make sure. The reason why I want to show you this is because he actually co-reigned with his father, which would be Constantine. So right here you can see Leo the IV, for the sake of understanding, when he jumped into Rome and when he reigned. So I'm gonna just turn it sideways again. So this image, that's Leo the IV, and you can kind of get a good idea of what he would have looked, what the Khazars would have looked like. It's also really interesting. You know, you got that AshkeNazi look. Very close related to the AshkeNazi look if you look very closely. Very common look right there. But let me turn it and continue. You can see it continues on for a while. And notice also where his kingdom increases. Notice where his kingdom increases. It increases here, which is fairly interesting. So just a little example, just to show you how the Khazars had some influence on Rome, for the sake of understanding. We'll go a little bit into that, into his influence on Rome, what he did, which we can go through a few information. Basically, the Khazars an expansion for them for the sake of understanding. So this is just showing us the connection. That's why, for example, 2 Corinthians 2:11 tells us, lest Satan should get advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices, right? Very important to understand that. Confederacies that you're seeing here, confederacies, these are things that are show all those timestamps. Okay, so 10 and so 1050. Let's go back to that video. In fact, I might need to click it again right here.
It can also be speculated that Jewish missionary refugees who also brought Byzantine arts, crafts, and superior methods of agriculture and trade probably used this influence to persuade the inner Khazar tribes of the political and spiritual advantages of conversion to the neutral Judaism. Whatever, by the 800s at the latest, Jewish-themed Moses coins are being issued in Khazar territories, a fact which allows us to segue on to the second stereotypically Khazar activity, trade. Khazar lands were known, especially in the 8th and 9th centuries, as a land of plenty. Persian geographer Hudud al-Alam states, "This is a very pleasant and prosperous country with great riches. From it come cows, sheep, and innumerable slaves." Unsurprisingly, such a place attracted significant amounts of commercial activity from all quarters. Straddling important trade routes along the Azov and Black and Caspian Seas, Don River, and especially on the Volga River, Khazaria functioned as for trade moving east and west and south, and this allowed the Kagan to make a killing from Silk Road profits. Custom duties were imposed on merchandise transported into the steppe by land and sea. When traders of the Rus brought valuables they intended to export past Atil, for example, the Khazar...
You don't have to see the rest of this because it just talks about trade, but I want to show you the summary of what they say at the end. Khazars
from the crumbling Khazar Empire are debate, which will likely go on for years to come. We will continue talking about steppe civilization.
You heard what he just said here? Now, we just seen them describe what the Khazars look like. We seen what most of the Ashkenazi look like, where they got orange hair and blue eyes, for the sake of understanding. Like, kind of look like a normal, a different type of Caucasian. Very rare type of Caucasian, too, with the orange hair, for the sake of understanding. But we can see that common amongst them, for the sake of understanding. So if the Khazars look like that, then all of a sudden another people popped up. We have to wonder, how is this possible? You know, because we have to wonder, when did they disappear? About the first century. I mean, first 1,000 years. That's also Yiddish. That study, the genetic study that actually shows that. See if this is something for another time. We go down a little bit. I want to show you now going back down. Because as you see, this is just a couple different things. Like you see these names, some area, certain names like that, Turks, that Khazars. These names are connected, right? All these names are connected. Very important. That's the linguistics. Linguistics, the study of their language. It's also going to be informing us on the location, where we find the location of some of those things, and we can find out what's going on here. So this is actually very, very important. But let me go here, and let me see if this is the one I wanted to show. I just want to make sure. Actually, I showed you this. I don't know why I got that down there twice. Or is it twice? Go. This is really interesting. Very interesting video that this brother has here. I can go over now. But I'm going to go to this. Name. Remember how names? How is it no different names? Now, I read these names, but I can't pronounce a lot of them. But I'm going to show you these ancient names only because it's important to know names. How they converted 740. This is also written down. Historical documents. This historical document, I believe, is in the 90s, 1933. It just pretty much talks about how the Khazars did convert. In fact, it talks about that the Jews, right? It says in Russia were Ashkenazi Jews. It says the Jews were Ashkenazi. It says descendants in part of the Alpine Khazars. See what he's saying there? 1993 that he's writing this. He's saying that the Khazars, he's saying that the Ashkenazi are descended from the Khazars. He said many of the Khazars and their kin, this is a common word, I like to talk about their leaders, were converted by Jewish missionaries, right? We just saw that. And they were formally accepted Judaism in 740 AD. It also tells us it is doubtful whether there is a single drop of old Palestinian or like the Semitic speaking Hebrew blood among these East European Jews. See what I'm saying there? We just seen the study of that, right? Remember how, let me go down a little bit. I'm going to go down. We go this person, nothing I would need to say. Person play, let the video play, and then he's gonna got a lot of information for this is gonna be for those that definitely wants to know this information, as this is gonna be something we'll refer to later on. Let me go down for some reason. It's scrolling slowly for some reason. Let me go down to it. All right. I don't know why it's like going like that. It usually slides. All right, right here. Related to the Ashkenazi, right? These are going to be the Ashkenazi. You can see the Sumerians, the Scythians, Scythians, or how you say it, Scythians. And then you see the Sumer. We've seen that with the Sumerians and all that. Gomer, right? These are connected. All these things are going to be connected. What you're seeing here. Remember barbarians, they were called barbarians. Remember they were called later on the Khazars for the sake of understanding. These are going to be the Celtics, things like that for the sake of understanding. That's what you're going to see here. You're going to see some of these names. You can see a lot of these names. You're going to see a lot of these names. So if you can see and remember any of these names, you're going to see that later in Jutland. This is where you're going to get Denmark, for the sake of understanding. You're going to get a lot of those, the Gauls, the area of the Gauls, the Gomari. You're going to see that Gog Turks, right? Turks, the Gog Turks, the Gogs, for the sake of understanding this. But let's go back. That's why it's important to know this, because when we think of Gog, it's not a mystery. The people knew that. Something that said certain very by historians. One historian, other one Muslim historian. For the sake of let's go to that quote here. Down a little. I don't know why it just rolled up. Let's see, this is a we was talking about right here. You see, we know that merged with Rome, but we also know the Khazars merged with Rome. But let's go down a little bit. I just want to show you something after this part right here. Just want to show you something right here. This is saying here. Historically, it's recorded that the Khazars are related to Gog and Magog. In fact, it says, I want you to hear this. Arab traveler Ibn Fidlain, I don't know if I'm saying it right, as also reports of this belief, right? He writes this, right? He records that some hold the opinion that Gog and Magog are the Khazars. See what it said there? This is also known, is written by Flavius Josephus. We're going to look at that. Flavius Josephus got an interesting chart where he talks about the sons of Gog and Magog, and he talks about how Gog is actually the sons of Gog is going to be Gomer. He also says the Scythians, right? Alexander the Great actually built a gate to keep them out. As you can see, Josephus knew them as a nation descended from Gog and Magog, or Magog, Japhanites, for the sake of understanding. So we're going to see all that. And we can see later on where you can see in the hands of early Christian writers, they became basically apocalyptic hordes. That's why you see later on they were called swarms, right? He says this is where those swarms came from because they didn't know who they were. They called them swarms. And although the medieval period, various identified as Vikings, right? They variously identified as Vikings. So they called some called Vikings, Huns, Khazars. See the Khazars, Mongolians, and remember, now the Khazars converted. That's why some knew them as one of the lost 10 tribes, for the sake of understanding. Now, if they said that they were one of the lost 10 tribes, then we wouldn't have much to debate right there. All we can do is speculate and do DNA tests. And even as I showed you, the Khazars had not a common thing for the sake very formal part. I don't need to talk. You got a lot of information. Why I want to show you this first. But before I show you that, I want to read you this. I want to read you this. It's a little interesting find right here. This was in 1732. This was from 1732, for the sake of understanding. It just talks about different names for the sake of understanding. It talks about Homer, like that. I want to read this to you. It just talks about certain names that they're connected with and things like that, for the sake of understanding. Right here, AshkeNazi, right? AshkeNazi, it tells us right here, the German nation. See what it's saying there? It's saying that the Ashkenazi was the German nation. See what it's saying there? Very important to understand that. So if the Ashkenazi was the German nation, why are the Ashkenazi Jews calling themselves Ashkenaz anyways? In fact, it says the father of the Ashkenazim, for the sake of understanding. It says, or first inhabitants of, note this place, Pontus. Pontus. See what it's saying there? Where is Pontus? Right? You can look at all my sources. This is a quoted in this video. Click it, you can see what book it is. I'm just going to click it for the sake of the live, for the sake of information, just for the sake of understanding. Right here, you can see it. This is it. It says royal genealogies of the genealogical tables, for the sake of understanding, from Adam to the times. See what it's saying there? Part 2. So it just goes over some things, and you can see this is an old book. If you're good with understanding Roman numbers, this number right here, XX 2, that's probably, something of the date, for the sake of understanding. If someone is able to calculate that, you can. But the answer is also in the book. The book will tell us the age, for the sake of understanding. But interesting. What's interesting correctly that it talks about the same family. It's the European Scythians, or the Goths, Goths, for the sake of understanding. It talks about Gomer, also being of the Kamari, right there, the Kamar, or the Sumerians, for the sake of understanding. You can also remember that with the Sumerians, right? You can also see those names very related, Gauls, right? Go down a little bit, Ashkenaz. Now this right here is going to be like the Britain, stuff like that, all that. We're not going to look at that one right now, but we can look at Ashkenaz, right? Pontus, right? From Pontus, and the connection with those things, for the sake of understanding. But let me actually go down. Pull one over. go to a book and just find it. Sometimes you may find Nazi is the Jew. They understand the Jew today is Ashkenazi. But for the sake of understanding, that's what you're going to see today. You can see right here is a quote. This is from their site. Listen how ironic this sounds. Listen how ironic this sounds on their site. The kings of the Khazars were powerful rulers who intermarried with families of the Byzantine and Arab monarchies. See what I'm saying there? It is not clear when the Khazars decided to give up their heathen ways and accept Judaism as their faith. The Khazars, right? The Khazar Jewish kingdom captured the imagination of the Jewish people of those days. Isn't that ironic? Isn't that just ironic? So what you're going to see here, you're going to see a really video.
To there, but it doesn't. He's trying to relate it because they have to try, because it doesn't.
Try to pull this back because for some reason this thing is like all in the way. Okay. Start from the beginning.
And I'd like to now of Israel, the Judeans.
Notice his hair. Notice his hair. He's an Ashkenazi. This is an Ashkenazi rabbi, right? Jewish, for the sake of understanding. Red hair, right? Most likely blue eyes, for the sake of understanding. This is the description of the Khazars. Remember what the Khazars look like, right? Continue.
You know, so what they create an identity for slaves, or there's really something here? And the answer is, most likely there is something there. Most likely, maybe that they were the original Israelites. Maybe that the people today who are white, Caucasian people came in a little bit later on. We know they're sold into. We know that they're fulfilling prophecies by saying, coming back, we want to read. We know that some of the greatest sages of the transmission of the Torah were converts from Rome. A man named Onkelos, who wrote a commentary on the Torah, unprecedented, that we still learn today. He was a convert. Some of the largest pillars on the transmission today were Roman converts. So here we are, we're Caucasian Jewish people.
All right. Right now in the Jewish Almanac from 1980. All right, this is the cover here. It says of Jewish life and the Jewish people, a fact-filled book. All right, again, a fact-filled book of information and entertainment. All right, traditions, history, religion, wisdom, and achievements. Again, the Jewish Almanac. All right, and we go right to part 1 of this Almanac magazine, Jewish Almanac, and it says, part 1, identity crisis. It says a brief history of the terms for Jew. All right, we're going to get into that. All right, so I'm zoomed in now. All right, so you can see it clearly. And it says here, strictly speaking, it is incorrect to call an ancient Israelite a Jew. All right, again, strictly speaking, it is incorrect to call an ancient Israelite a Jew, or to call a contemporary Jew an Israelite. All right, so you can't say that the ancient Israelites are the same as Jews. All right, that's incorrect. And you can't say that modern Jews or contemporary Jews are Israelite or a Hebrew. You can't say they're Hebrew, contemporary Jews. All right, again, we're in the Jewish Almanac of 1980. So you can't, just because somebody's called a Jew, basically what they're saying, that doesn't mean, that's incorrect to think that they're talking about an Israelite or a Hebrew. The first Hebrews may not have been Jews at all. Again, the first Hebrews, remember, Hebrews may not have been Jews at all. All right, so we're in Online Etymology Dictionary. All right, and we got the word Hebrew here. Just wanted to go ahead and read this before we continue. So what is Hebrew? It says here an adjective, right? It says late Old English, from Old French Hebrew, from Latin Hebraeus, from Greek Hebraios, and Aramaic Semitic Hebrai, corresponding to Hebrew Ibri, and Israelite, in quotes. Traditionally from an ancestral name Eber, all right, so they get it from Eber, but probably literally, all right, but most likely literally one from the other side. One from the other side. So if you're in Africa or you're in Europe and you want to reference an American, you're going to say, well, he's one from the other side, right? He's on the other side of the ocean. Perhaps in reference to the river Euphrates. Is this the real ancient Atlantic Ocean? Was it just a river? Was it a huge river? So perhaps simply signifying immigrant. All right, so look at what it all means. It says Eber also means region on the other or opposite side. All right, a region on the opposite side. So wouldn't America be on the opposite side of Europe, Asia, and Africa? All right, America is on the opposite. Are you a Hebrew? Well, if you're on the opposite side, Africa and Europe, meaning if you're in America, yeah, you could use Hebrew as an adjective. All right, so we're trying to break this down, not trying to say this is a religion or anything, just trying to show the etymology, because it means something, right? It doesn't just mean a religion or something like that, right? So it's a very general term, actually, as you can see, but it means something specifically to somebody being separated, right? Being separated or unreachable to certain people, all right? On another side. All right, so the first Hebrews may not have been Jews at all. All right, so we're back in the Jewish almanac. All right, now listen to what it says here. It says now Hebrew. All right, again, we just got the etymology online. Now they're going to break it down, right? In this almanac, it says Hebrew. The word Hebrew or Ibri, right? We got that. Occurs in the early narratives of the Pentateuch to refer to an Israelite. All right, so remember what it meant. So an Israelite, when they were saying Hebrew or Ibri, they were saying, yo, he's a migrant. Yo, oh, he's one from the other side. Oh, he's from the region from the other side. So that person's from the other side. When they were referring an Israelite to a Hebrew, meaning this person was one from the other side. And migrant of Eber, we got also Eber, feather, of the feathers, of the people who wear feathers. But only in those narratives, such as the Joseph story, Genesis 39:48, and the Exodus story, Exodus 3:10, that are set in Egypt, where Israelites are regarded as foreigners. All right, foreigners, ones from another side. Who was calling them Hebrew? All right, and who was the real Egyptians? We're still talking about American to marry the mound builders and all that, Little Egypt. It doesn't matter if it was people that were here still. Yeah, not everybody was from the same nation, but we were all here. This is the ancient land. This is the biblical lands up over here. All right, so it says they were foreigners there. All right, so they would be called somebody from another side, right, or another region, because they're foreigners from that land. So an Egyptian would call them an Ibri, a migrant, or somebody from the other side, a Hebrew. It says there, Hebrew is either used by Egyptians to refer to Israelites or by Israelites to refer to themselves in the presence of Egyptians among themselves. The preferred term is Bene Yisrael, children of Israel, or Israelites. Another way could be Yasharallah. All right. A similar usage of Hebrew is found in the stories of the interaction between Israelites and Philistines. In 1 Samuel, and the interaction of Abraham with Canaanites and other non-Israelites in Genesis 14, where the Greek translator renders the term Ivri by a word meaning man of the Jonder region. You see, they're breaking it down again. Ivri, Hebrew Ibri, a man from a Jonder region, from another region, a man from the opposite side, somebody who's not from this land, all right, a man from Jonder region. Jonah, likewise, at sea with a crew of non-Israelites, refers to himself in the presence as a Hebrew, because he's saying, yo, I'm just a man from the Jonder region. You don't know me. I'm from over there, Maraka. All right? Remember, Jonah was in the ocean, traveling. So since the term Ivri is possibly based on the common preposition "iver," meaning
This
across.
one's really interesting. I'm just gonna move up a little bit on this. There's a part I want to show you here. Go back a little bit. I don't want to show you that part. I want to show you this. Go back a little bit.
Descended.
Go back a little bit. So this we were just looking at this. This is a genetic study.
All right, so we just got right, these Khazars, right? So we're going to learn a little bit about the Ashkenazi, or at least what we can find, all right, here. But we're going to read some other things later on. But it says here in this website, it's called thescientist.com, exploring life, inspiring innovation. And it says here, genetic roots of the Ashkenazi Jews. Most Ashkenazi Jews, traditionally believed to have descended from the ancient tribes of Israel, may in fact be maternally descended from prehistoric Europeans. All right, they're actually Europeans. The majority of Ashkenazi Jews are descended from the prehistoric European women, according to a study published Tuesday, October 8th in Nature Communications. While the Jewish religion began in the Near East and the Ashkenazi Jews were believed to have origins in the early indigenous tribes of this region, new evidence from mitochondrial DNA, which has passed on exclusively from mother to child, suggests that female ancestors of most modern Ashkenazi Jews converted to Judaism in the North Mediterranean around 2,000 years ago, and later in West and Central Europe. All right, again, what? Converted. So that first rabbi we heard, he's letting us know these Romans, that these famous sages that actually taught the Torah, these very famous ancient sages that was teaching the Torah, were actually converted Romans to these first, converted Jews. Right? They were actually converted too, Romans. We're in this other website says frontiers.
Just for a bit of that, for the sake of understanding what I mean by the different branch, just scroll up. Go up to that. Let's just go. Keep doing it. Let's go up. Go in. Gotta get this ding from doing back scrolls like it does that. Go down and seeing that. So you see this J vein. We already looked at that. We looked at that yesterday. J vein. That's gonna go to Kittim or Chittim. That's gonna be what you're gonna see the Romans. Ashkenazi is from a different branch, though from Japheth. It's gonna be Gomer. That's gonna be the Ashkenazi. That's going to be from Gog and Magog, for the sake of understanding. Magog is here, right there.
Next, the origin of Ashkenazi Jews and British. Historical meaning says Ashkenaz is one of the most disputed biblical place names. It appears in the Hebrew Bible as the name of one of Noah's descendants. All right, that's what the guy was talking about earlier through Japhet, right? One of his sons. As a reference to the kingdom of Ashkenaz, prophesied to be called together with Ararat and Minai to wage war against Babylon. Jeremiah 51:27, in addition to tracing Ashkenazi Jews to the ancient Iranian lands of Ashkenaz and uncovering the villages whose names may derive from Ashkenaz, the partial Iranian origin of Ashkenazi Jews inferred by Das et al. 2006 was further supported by genetic similarity of Ashkenazi Jews to Sephardic Mountain Jews and Iranian Jews, as well as their similarity to Near Eastern populations and simulated native Turkish and Caucasus populations. Caucasus, the Khazar.
Caucasians, right? You see what it's saying there? That's where you see that name. That name is not just a name that's just made up. The Caucasian mountains, the area where we're looking over there. Let's just go to a map and take a look at it. In fact, I know a better way to find pictures like this. I'll show you an interesting map here. Khazars right there. Caucasus Mountains right there. That's the term Caucasian mountains right there. That's why you will see these ones up here will be more closely related. That's why I said from that line and northward. That's what they said they came from. From that line about, up in the mountains, for the sake of understanding. Going
for inferring that Jews who consider themselves Ashkenazic adopted this name and spoke of their lands as Ashkenaz, since they perceived themselves as Iranian origin, that we find varied evidence of the knowledge of Iranian language among Moroccan and Andalusian Jews and Karaites. You hear this? It's a big confederacy here. Andalusians, what are you talking about? Huh? Thought that was a Moorish town. Alright? Karaites. And to the 11th century's compelling point of reference to assess the shared Iranian origins of Sephardic and Ashkenazic Jews. Moreover, Iranian-speaking Jews, so-called Juhudis, and Turkic-speaking Jews in the Crimea prior to World War II called themselves Ashkenazism. Ashkenazism?
Nazi?
The Rhineland hypothesis cannot explain why a name that denotes Scythians and was associated with the Near East becomes associated with German lands in the 11th to 13th century. Uproot suggested that Jewish immigrants in Europe transferred biblical names onto the regions in which they settled. This is unconvincing. Biblical names were used as place names only when they had similar sound. Not only Germany and Ashkenaz do not share similar sounds, but Germany was already named Germana or Manja in the Iranian Babylonian Talmud, completed in the 5th century AD, and not surprisingly was associated with Noah's grandson Gomer. Talmud Joma, alright? Noah's grandson Gomer. Gomer from Gomer, alright, you hear this? That's Japhet again.
You heard what I just said there? It says the grandson of Gomer, it says his name was very close related to the Talmud. What you seeing there? Yoma, for the sake of understanding. But let's proceed.
Alright, Talmud Joma continues as the genetic structure of Ashkenazic Jews. Ashkenazic Jews were localized to modern-day Turkey and found to be genetically closest to Turkic Southern Caucasian.
Remember we looked at that? This is another report on this site right here. I'm gonna have to grab that for the sake of understanding. I'm just gonna screenshot it. All right. Another witness, right? We just looked at that witness. We just seen what they just said there. They said they were related, right? Just to get that reminder, just in case if we have brothers and sisters that may come in a little later for the sake of understanding. That reminder. Like this goes at the bottom. Maybe not. Maybe turn it sideways is easier to scroll sideways. That way I can do more longer scrolls. Why I keep going up like that? Why is it going up? I don't know why it's going up like that. I've never seen that before. All right, go over. Just like this. Right, let's look at that. Let's look at that genetic report. I'm really interested with the genetic report. It actually shows us is it saying the same thing, right? The same thing. As soon as the Khazars disappear, that's when the Ashkenazi arrive. As soon as the Khazars disappears, right soon as they disappear, which is recorded, right? It's recorded as soon as they disappeared. Is one of their chromosomes, right? To talk about them praying converted in masses to Jews, right? Very important. Large groups, right? some people 14th century when they landed in Rhine area that's later turned to many researchers and agree with this. Agree with this finding for the sake of also their page. They found it true. Took it off of their AshkeNazi. I want to read this part. Right? This is a report. This is actual study. Region, Jews were found to be more closely related to groups in the north of the farm. It says that they're related to the Turks. That's who the Khazars are. Gog Turk, right? We just looked at that. Gog Turk, for the sake of
and Iranian population, suggesting the origin of Iranian Ashkenaz lands, descendants of Ashkenaz and the lands of Ashkenaz. These findings were more compatible with an Irano-Turco-Slavic origin for Ashkenazi Jews and a Slavic origin for Yiddish than with the Rhineland hypothesis. So this is the original. They say, oh, we're just German. You know, that's what it means. Ashkenaz means German. All right, but actually it's Turkic and, Caucasian and, it has a lot of Slavic relations as well. All those areas up there in between, almost getting to the Middle East, but actually in Europe still. Eastern Europe, they call. The findings have also highlighted the strong social, cultural, and genetic bonds of Ashkenazic and Iranian Judaism and their shared Iranian origins. All right, so now I'm in myJewishLearning.com. Says, who are the Ashkenazi Jews? All right. Now, it's important what we just read. You know how they're trying the Reinhardt hypothesis means that they just came from Germany and that's it. They have no relation to Iranians or Turkish people or Caucasian people, none of that, right? Because they, they want to be linked to ancient Hebrew. So going with the whole Turkic and Iranian thing, it doesn't link them to that. So here it says Ashkenazi Jews are the Jewish ethnic identity most readily recognized by North Americans. All right. So most of the Jews in North America are what? Ashkenazi Jews. The culture of matzah balls, black-hatted Hasidim in Yiddish, the ethnicity originated in medieval Germany. Although strictly speaking, all right, so now this is what the story goes, right, that originated in Germany, but we just debunked that, right, through genetics. We just saw the two other websites, right? Although strictly speaking, Ashkenazism refers to Jews of Germany, the term has come to refer more broadly Jews from Central and Eastern Europe, all right, it has come. They're learning, there's new information coming out. You can't control the information. All right, genetics is telling people, and there's more information to tell you that it's actually more broadly to Jews from Central and Eastern Europe. Jews first reached the interior of Europe by following trade routes along waterways during the 8th and 9th centuries. Eventually, the vast majority of Ashkenazi Jews relocated to the Polish Commonwealth, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Ukraine, and Belarus. All right, we got that already too, where princes welcomed their skilled and educated workforce. The small pre-existing Polish Jewish communities' customs were displaced by the Ashkenazic prayer, order, customs, and Yiddish language. All right. That the Ashkenazi people, says today Ashkenazism constitute more than 80% of all Jews in the world. All right. Now remember what they told us in
think about that, family. 80% of the so-called, let's proceed,
the almanac, that just because you're a Jew doesn't mean you're an ancient Israelite. It's not synonymous. All right? Remember that. Vastly outnumbered Sephardic Jews. In the early 21st century, Ashkenazic Jews numbered about 11 million. In Israel, the numbers of Ashkenazism and Sephardim are rough, and the chief rabbinate has both as Ashkenazic and a Sephardic chief rabbi on equal footing. All Reform and conservative Jewish congregations belong to the Ashkenazic tradition. All right?
But you're
my grandparents was the generation of the first Jews to take on Zionism as an ideology and take on this idea of establishing a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And he was very active. He became a leader within the movement. He was a member of the de facto Jewish government before the State of Israel was established. And he was one of the signers on the Declaration of Independence when the State of Israel was established.
Okay, and then from there, your father actually, he was the general.
My father was, yes, both my parents were born in Palestine, so they're the first generation Israelis, if you will, first generation Jews who were born there. And my father, as a young man, while still in high school, joined the Zionist militia, became an officer in the War of 1948, when the Zionists occupied most of Palestine. He was an officer already. And then he remained in the military as a career officer, and by 1967 he was already a general and a member of the Israeli Central Command, the High Command.
Now something happened in your life, something very sad and tragic, that your niece, she was killed by a suicide bomber, is that right?
Questions because there was a lot of press, it was big news in Israel. In fact, it was big news everywhere, all over the world, because the granddaughter of a famous general. In terms of responsible, both she and her husband said, we hold the Israeli government responsible for our daughter's death because when you maintain such a brutal oppression and a brutal occupation against another nation, when you take away people's land and you destroy their homes, when you incarcerate their fathers and quite often their mothers, when you shoot their brothers and sisters in the schoolyards, this is what we get. This is the price that you pay as a society that maintains such a brutal oppression and occupation against them. There's a price to be paid, and this is the price that we pay, and therefore they both felt that they both held the Israeli government responsible because the Israeli government is responsible for the reality that exists there.
Now someone just said that's an anti-Semitic statement you just made. Somebody's pointing the finger and say this guy's anti-Semitic. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I'm Jewish, so being anti-Semitic is nonsense. Number one. Two, being anti-Semitic means being racist against Jews. I'm not racist against Jews. But I am critical of the State of Israel. I'm critical of Zionism, which has really nothing to do with Jews, although they claim to. So there's nothing anti-Semitic about criticizing Israel. In fact, most Jews don't even live there. Most Jews do Zionism, so I don't think that has anything to do with it. And it's a claim that's being thrown out when there's nothing else to say. The other side, the pro-Israeli side, the side that supports the violence in Palestine, has nothing to say. They say anti-Semitic. Well, so they say anti-Semitic.
What if someone says, look, he's just a self-hating Jew? Have you heard this statement?
Yeah, well, I certainly don't hate myself. So that's nonsense. Most things they throw at you when they've got no argument.
I just had he said, you left your home and then someone came and occupied it.
These Jews, 3,000 years ago, making the assumption that the descendants of the ancient Hebrews that used to live in that part of the world some 3,000 years ago. That's a bit of a stretch for me. And even if it was true, I don't think it. I agree with him. It doesn't justify. I did not live there 3,000 years ago. My grandparents immigrated from Ukraine. Their parents, their grandparents didn't live there, and I don't know any Jew that can trace his or her ancestors back to the ancient Hebrews. I did not live there 3,000 years ago. My grandparents immigrated from Ukraine. Their parents, their grandparents didn't live there, and I don't know any Jew that can trace his or her ancestors back to the ancient Hebrews. So that's a lot of, there, and I don't think it's relevant. So that's a lot of myth there, and I don't think it's relevant to the point.
Go up a little bit.
So we don't just hear, oh, it's a mystery where they originate. It's a mystery. You don't even know where the Greeks and all these people originated, right? But try to make sense of who their ancestors are, right? And see if biblically we can make this historical. All right, so we were just talking about, well, we talked about the Ashkenazi Jews, right? Ashkenaz, we got the pastor mentioning them, and also we read about, how most of the Eastern European Jews were Ashkenaz, right? So we know that Ashkenaz is actual person, all right? So, logically, like the pastor was saying, everybody, and then the studies that they were saying, that, must be like they're descendant from this dude Ashkenaz, who's actually son of Gomer and son of Japhet, so a grandson of Japhet, Ashkenaz. And it says here ancient names, Reginius, Ashkenazi, Sakai, and it says eventually Japanese. You see that? Eventually the Japanese. All right, right there. But we got Togarma, about Togarma as well. All right, because we know they already related that the Ashkenaz.
So it's coming. You're going to see some historical reports.
Us, or the Ashkenazi Jews, right, are more Eastern European related to Turks, and we know that Togarma is the descendant or ancestor, of the Turkomans or the Turks.
That's why you see they're related to the Turks, right? Same family tree, Turks.
Togarma, all right, and these are all from Japhet, so they're related. These are from Japhet, Magog and Gomer. All right, we even see Madai, Medes, the Little Russians, Ukrainians.
I'm gonna go up a little bit.
And go
this
under okay. All right, I'm in the Bible Dictionary by Merrill C. Tini. All right, this is the official one in the 60s. All right, we're going to go to page 76. Around page 76, let me see. All right, so actually page 77 of this book, and it says Ashkenaz, right? Ashkenaz, great-grandson of Noah through Japhet and Gomer, all right? And this is the Bible verses. It says a tribe or nation mentioned once in Jeremiah 51:27, associated with the Ararat and Mini as an instrument of wrath in the hands of God against Babylon. They fought for the Most High, And so again, a tribe or a nation, a nation. He has a nation, Ashkenaz. All right, he had a nation. Where's their descendants? All right, we're page. See, now. Right? It says God will enlarge. That's what it means. It says a son of Noah. He was older than Shem, but comes third in some list of the three sons. Shem, however, is usually named first. Japhet and his wife were saved in the ark. He aided Shem in covering the naked body of their drunken father. He is the progenitor of the more remote northern peoples of southeastern Europe. All right? Ancestor what? Of who? Southeastern Europe's, right? Ashkenazi Jews, these Khazars, all these Turks, right? Mongols. That he was to occupy the tents of Shem is thought to refer to conquest of the Greeks who were descendants of Japhet. All right? The Greeks are descendants of Japhet. All right? Greeks, the Greeks are black, right? We saw Medicine Man's video. The ancient Greeks were black. All right? So even Japhet was black. It wasn't always about white. All right? This he did during the days of Assyrian power. He had 7 sons whose descendants occupied the isles of the Gentiles, Hellenes or Greeks, an area including Asia Minor and Upper Greece. All right? That's Japhet right there. All right?
I don't know. Show that map real fast for sake of understanding. So now we're going to first also get from different branches of the Gog Turks, the Khazars. So now we're going to talk about the Khazars, and that's the ones that converted, right? The ones right above the Caucasus Mountains, right above it. And then these are going to be the ones that converted to Judaism. So you can see It's going to be very important. I'm going to look at that for the sake of understanding. Now it's going to be historical reports.
Studies in Bibliography and Book Lore, Volume 11, number 1 and 2. All right, from the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. All right, and this is the article we're going to read. It says, this bibliography is based on the same principles as its predecessor, which appeared more than a decade ago. The annotations of the items are designed to indicate similar angles, such as the beginning and destruction of the Khazar state, eventual continuation after the 10th century conversion, problems of migration westward, and the origin of Eastern European Jewry.
So remember 10th century? Remember supposed disappeared and then the emerging of the European Jewish people.
But this time the emphasis is also on several additional angles such as the visibility or lack of it in Jewish sources of the connection between the Khazars and Judaism or Jews. The application of the history of the Khazars today to today's political purposes and its combination with anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, or anti-Israeli tendencies. The first Josephus genealogical table, 9th or 10th century, which depicts the Khazars as descendants of Togarma, a grandson of Noah's son Japhet. All right, so let's go back to that table we had earlier. All right, so Togarma, right? Togarma right here.
Very important.
Yeah. All right, Togarma. The Khazars come out of this person, it says, supposedly the Khazars from Gomer and Japhet. All right. Without mentioning that they, at least some of them, had any connection with Judaism. It is carried over into later centuries, for examples by two 12th century Jewish travelers, Benjamin of Tudela and Pedachia of Risenberg. Bibliography, and as the number says, and Ishak Abramanel, commentary of Ezekiel, chapter 38, which by implication counts the Khazars among the people who will come with Gog to fight the Jews in the land of Israel and perish there. You see that? They will come with Gog. The Khazars, man, these Confederate. Who's the Khazars? See why they ain't mentioning the Khazars or want to be connected to these Khazars? All right? Among the people who will come with Gog to fight the Jews in the land of Israel and perish there. This, written in 1493, indicates that he regards the Khazars as anti-Jewish Gentiles. And then right here got a couple of sources. It says here by Marcus Nathan Adler, the itinerary of Benjamin of Tudela says the southern provinces of Russia were spoken of as the land of the Khazars, especially by Jewish writers long after the Russian conquest about the year 1000. And the Crimea was known to European travelers as Khazaria. All right. On this side it says Naji Alush Al-Masira ila Palestine, says the journey to Palestine. 1964 says there were 10 million Jewish Khazars. Thus, the Jews of Eastern Europe, who were the most Zionistic, did not originate in the kingdom of Judah and were not Semites. It says here by Menachem Amelander, Ben Solomon Halevi. All right, it says first edition, Yiddish, Amsterdam, 1741. Then it says new edition, translation into Hebrew by Haim Homer, Jerusalem, in 1964. I don't remember the quoting sources here. It says Jehuda Halevi translated the Sefer HaKusari from the Khazar language. According to Arab authors, Khazar, or Khazar, right, was the son of Japhet, or a descendant of Japhet, the son of Noah. Khazar separated from his brothers after they left the ark, and he came to the river Volga, building a large city there, which he called Al-Khazar. These people who lived on the sea are also called Khazars, since they joined the Khazar nation. At first, the Khazar king leaned toward the Karaite form of Judaism until Rabbi Judah al-Nagari explained to him that this is not the real Judaism. He then converted to traditional Judaism, and according to the teachings of our rabbis, over 100,000 people converted to Judaism. You see that? They converts. All right. Now we got another source here. It says Baraz GM Dreineshiv Erisko Kasaro Ruski. All right, he got a very long name. All right, the oldest Jewish Khazar Russian legal monument, the legal code for people. In Sobrani Trudovpo Bopruso. All right, that's Russian. All right there again. It says collected works on the problem of the Jewish element in the monuments of old Russian literature, volume 1. is from 1927, and it says, insofar as the Slavic nations, especially the Bulgars, were influenced by the Old Testament, it was through the Jewish Khazars. Alright, Slavic nations, Jewish Khazars, the converts. The original legal code, which was enforced in Khazaria, consisted of the religio-civil code designed for the populace. Another source here says Julian Bartosiewicz, Studia Historicini y Literarchi, or Historical and Literary Studies, Volume 2, from 1881. Alright, it says the Khazars were a people related to the Huns. Alright, the Huns. The Khazar state was multi-tribal, speaking a language which resembled that of the Volga Bulgars. The religion of the top rulers was Judaism, to which they changed from Islam. From what? From Islam. From what? From Islam. Alright, you see the relation, you see where the relation's going, right? Confederate, you see what's going on here, right? We're gonna get deeper into this as the videos go. Alright? Alright, another source here, it says Bashmakov, or Une solution nouvelle de problème de Khazars, Mercury de France. Alright? Pages 39 and 73 says the Khazars' racial origin and the geographic position of their capital seems to confirm the information given in King Joseph's letter. Gotta get into that. It says here, John O. Betty, The Iron Curtain Over America, Dallas, 1951, chapters 3 and 4, Russia and the Khazars. And the Khazars joined the Democratic Party. It says the author maintains that communism is the creation of Judaized Khazars in Russia. The Marxian program of drastic controls, so repugnant to the free Western mind, the acceptance by many Khazar Jews for the Babylonian Talmud under which they lived had taught them to accept authoritarian dictation on everything from their immorality to their trade practices. He also states that persons of Khazar background or tradition or of related origin or ideology are in high positions and influence in the American Democratic Party and the United States government, and that they play leading roles in England and France. Alright, it says here from Ishak Ben Sevi, alright, so from Tel Aviv from 1951. It says Jews came very early to the Crimea, where they organized agriculture and urban settlements and took over the commerce between the Slavs and the Khazars, upon both of whom they exerted some influence. But it was mainly the Persian Jews, again, who was these Persian Jews, who influenced the Khazar king Bulan and his top officials to convert to Judaism in 732 or 740. The military and civilian elite were the first to become Jews, and later others followed in their footsteps. In the 9th and the beginning of the 10th century, when the Khazars conquered the Crimea, the local Crimean Jews integrated into Khazar Jewry. At the beginning of the 11th century, the Khazar state was definitely defeated by the Russian princes, losing its oldest center on the River Don, but continuing to rule in Dagestan, northern Caucasus, and the Crimea. It has now become clear that something of the Jewish Khazar state existed up to the 13th century until the Mongol invasion. So-called Mongol, who's this? These hordes. The hordes, which is the Russian armies. Talking about Georgy, Genghis, aka Genghis. Okay, we got another source here. It says from Jivo, Letter 13 from 1938, pages 109 to 23. It says the native Crimean Jews, the Krimchaki and the Karaites, have different blood types than the Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews, right? They're different. You see, the Karaites, they ain't the same as these Ashkenazi. Because we learned about the Karaites and Prester John, right? Alright, but they have a different blood type than the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic Jews. Their blood structure is close to that of the pure Turkic tribes from Jafet, right? And the Kyrgyz and the Uzbeks, this blood composition may possibly be connected with the Khazar origin. Alright, we got another source here from Mohammed Isat Darwaza. It says Tariq Bani Israeli min Asfarim, the history of the children of Israel from their books, Volume 3, Cairo 1960. It says the Khazars were the largest group to convert to Judaism, and they are known as Ashkenazism. What? The Khazars are known as Ashkenazism? They converted to Judaism? Another source here says Max Diamant and Arthur Praise, I can't read that. All right, and this is from the Judici Volkskunst by Max de Mont in 1937. It says, before the immigration of Jews from Germany, remnants of the Khazars who had converted to Judaism in their Asiatic abodes came to Poland. So before they got to Poland or Germany, all right, Jews from Germany, right? They didn't originate there. They didn't just go from the Holy Land to Germany. All right, these were Khazars who converted to Judaism, all right, before they got there to Poland. Traces of their culture can be found in the Jewish art of Eastern Europe. All right, so I just wanted to show you some examples because actually, you know, this keeps going. There's actually a lot of references, you know, keep going to the next keep references, articles about this article, right? So we can go all day, maybe talk about this, but I just want to continue with the video. I just wanted you to get a clear understanding of historical people, historical empire. They didn't just Spanish, right? All right, so just one quick source so you can see, you know, I'm just picking them at random. A little bit more. All right, and it starts right here in the bottom from Julil Jasen, Historia Evrekrikosko Narodo Rossi, the history of the Jewish people in Russia, volume 1. All right, and it goes right here. It says the Khazars came from Asia into South Russian steppe, where they formed a number of urban settlements. In the 8th century, the Khazar king Kagan and his entourage embraced the Jewish religion. They embraced it, they converted. During the same century, they overpowered the Eastern Slavic tribes. A century later, they spread their rule over the whole territory between northern Caucasus and the Kiev region. By 964 or thereabouts, the Kiev prince defeated the Khazars, who soon disappeared. See? Like I told you, they say they disappeared, but they actually went to Poland. There's a lot of different investigations. Like it says over here on this side, look, I didn't read this. Like Jewish settlements in Poland and Russia, all right? So they were about 300 years. That's not a little bit. That was a lot. That was a big empire. They were controlling the trade between Europe and Asia, right? All right, now we're in by Arthur Koestler. All right. Now it says, this is the history of the ancient Khazar Empire, a major but almost forgotten power in Eastern Europe, which in the Dark Ages became converted to Judaism. Khazaria was finally wiped out by the forces of Genghis Khan, but evidence indicates that the Khazars themselves migrated to Poland and formed the cradle of Western Jewry. So again, now we're seeing, so if these, now we heard that, you know, they're not the Hebrews from the ancient, you know, times, from different sources already, right? He even got, you know, the son of a, you know, one of the founding fathers of Israel, letting you know straight up. They're not the same people that lived there 3,000 years ago, even though it wasn't there. But anyways, they're letting us know in this book that there was a empire which was called the Khazar Empire, all right? A major but almost forgotten power in Eastern Europe. And it says that, you know, these people were not wiped out completely by Genghis Khan and these so-called Mongols. We're talking about Genghis Khan. Is this really Georgy Danilovich, the original Russians? This is Judov, all right? So, either way, they're saying that these Khazars were not wiped out completely. They actually migrated to Poland and formed the cradle of Western Jewry. And the you know, the first rabbi we heard, he's letting you know, hey man, these are Caucasian people. We're Caucasian people. You know, and then the second preacher, the guy, the pastor, he's letting you know, these are white people. These are 80% European DNA. All right? These Khazars, all right? They're not even, you know, he told us Ashkenazi, right? So this correlating with this book also. So it says the Khazars extend from the Black Sea to the Caspian, from the Caucasus to the Volga, and they were instrumental in stopping the Muslim onslaught against Byzantium, the eastern jaw of the gigantic pincer movement that in the west swept across northern Africa and into Spain. So they were actually helping Europe not get invaded that much by Muslims or Arabs, because they were kind of in the way. To get to from Asia to Europe, you have to go through the Caucasus if you don't want to go through Africa and the Mediterranean. So yeah, they were holding that down, and they weren't letting nobody go by there. So they were kind of helping. They had an important role. All right. In the second part of this book, The Heritage, Mr. Koester speculates about the ultimate fate of the Khazars and their impact on the racial composition and social heritage of modern Jewry. He produces a large body of meticulously detailed research in support of a theory that sounds all the more convincing for the restraint with which it is advanced. Yet, should this theory be confirmed, the term anti-Semitism would become void of meaning, since, as Mr. Koester writes, it is based on a misapprehension shared by both the killers and their victims. The story of the Khazar Empire, as it slowly emerges from the past, begins to look like the most cruel hoax which history has ever perpetrated. All right? Y'all deep they're getting? These Khazars. Part 1. Rise and fall. Sir. Emperor of Europe between the Caucasus and the Volga were ruled by a Jewish state known as the Khazar Empire. Alright, so by the time of Charlemagne, this famous king, there was already a Jewish state known openly by everyone. The Khazar Empire was a Jewish state. Alright, during the time of Charlemagne. At the peak of its power from the 7th to the 10th centuries AD, it played a significant part in shaping the destinies of medieval and consequently of modern Europe. Alright, an important part. This Khazar Empire in modern Europe are a very important part in medieval and modern Europe. The Byzantine emperor and historian Constantine Porphyrogenitus must have been well aware of this when he recorded in his treatise on court protocol that letters addressed to the Pope in Rome, and similarly those to Emperor of the West, had a gold seal worth 2 solidi attached to them, whereas messages to the king of the Khazars displayed a seal worth 3 solidi. It had more worth, they're saying. This was not flattery, but real politic. In the period with which we are concerned, wrote Bury, it is probable that the Khan of the Khazars was a little less important in view of the imperial foreign policy than Charles the Great and his successors. All right, so he had a very important role. He was respected just like Charles the Great. A few years later, probably AD 740, the king, his court, and the military ruling class embraced the Jewish faith. All right, this is it right here. How did they become Jews? The king, right? His court, the military ruling class, they all embraced the Jewish faith. And Judaism became the state religion of the Khazars. It wasn't a heritage for them. It wasn't a race. It wasn't a people, a nation. It was a religion, and it became the official faith. It became the state religion of the Khazars. They adopted it as a religion. No doubt their contemporaries were as astonished by this decision as modern scholars were when they came across the evidence in the Arab, Byzantine, Russian, and Hebrew sources. You understand? Modern scholars know this is a fact. It's in the Arab sources, right? The Byzantine sources, the Russian sources, and Hebrew sources. All right, classical antique sources. One of the most recent comments is to be found in a work by the Hungarian Marxist historian Dr. Antal Barta. His book on the Magyar society in the 8th and 9th centuries has several chapters on the Khazars, as during most of that period, the Hungarians were ruled by them. Yet their conversion to Judaism is discussed in a single paragraph, with problems pertaining to the history of ideas. But we must call the reader's attention to the matter of the Khazar kingdom state religion. It was the Jewish faith which became the official religion of the ruling strata of society. It became, needless to say, the acceptance of the Jewish faith as the state religion of an ethnically non-Jewish people or non-Hebrew people. Non-Hebrew, they're not the Hebrews, could be the subject of interesting speculations. We shall, however, confine ourselves to the remark that this official conversion is defiance of Christian proselytizing by Byzantium the Muslim influence from the East, and in spite of the political pressure of these two powers, to a religion which had no support from any political power, but was persecuted by nearly all, has come as a surprise to all historians concerned with the Khazars and cannot be considered as accidental, but must be regarded as a sign of the independent policy pursued by that kingdom. All right, so they weren't influenced by anybody. We got that Persians who taught them this, Hebrew religion, and they adopted it from the Persians. Who were these Persians? Were these actually ancient people from America? There's a lot of correlation to Persian culture similarities that they found here when they went into Mesoamerica and they went to South America. So we're correlating all that. Where's the true old, the true old world is here, but where were these ancient lands really? Like we've been ancient Persia, ancient Babylon, all right? That a lot of those people really come from out of America, and a lot of those tales really happen in America. All right, so these people bring that influence over here to these people, to the Khazars from the Caucasus Mountains. All right, continues says, which leads before. Whereas the sources differ in minor detail, the major facts are beyond dispute. All right, so there's a fact. It's a fact that they are saying. What is in dispute, though, is they're disputing, though, is the fate of the Jewish Khazars. What happened to these so-called Jewish Khazars after the destruction of their empire in the 12th or 13th century? On this problem, the sources are scant, but various late medieval Khazar settlements are mentioned in the Crimea, in the Ukraine, in Hungary, Poland, and Lithuania. Now, I believe that these countries have a lot of Jews, right? Jewish Khazars. The general picture that emerges from these fragmentary pieces of information is that of a migration of Khazar tribes and communities into those regions of Eastern Europe, mainly Russia and Poland. So if people knew the term Hebrew meaning one from the other side, and these people were not from there, these Khazars, and they would get there, wouldn't the local people call them Hebrews? Meaning those immigrants, foreigners, immigrants, those from another region? Could be, right? Now it says here, where at the dawn of the modern age, the greatest concentrations of Jews were found. All right, so Russia and Poland. All right, they know the Khazar tribes ended up there, large communities of Khazar, and that's actually where the largest concentrations of Jews are found in Europe, Russia and Poland. All right, this has led several historians to conjecture that a substantial majority of Eastern Jews, the majority, remember the dude said 80% of the DNA, and hence of world Jewry, might be of Khazar and not Semitic origin. All right, the Eastern Jews. All right, and he let us know, remember before, that these are the same people that ended up founding the state of Israel, these Eastern Jews, who are actually, might be more Khazar and not Semitic origin. They're not the Hebrews, not Semitic. The far-reaching implications of this hypothesis may explain by historians in option this altogether. And honestly, I have been with it. Alright? Fair use. Do what you want with the info. I'm just reading books. Don't kill the messenger. Thus, in the 1973 edition of the Encyclopedia Judaica, the article Khazars is signed by Dunlop, but there's a separate section dealing with the Khazar Jews after the fall of the kingdom, signed by the editors, and written with the obvious intent to avoid upsetting believers in the dogma of the chosen race. Now it says, speaking Karaites, a fundamentalist Jewish sect. Alright? Who are these Turkish-speaking Karaites? We're talking about the ancient ones, not the ones that we believe they are. Alright? Of Crimea, Poland, and elsewhere have affirmed a connection with the Khazars, which is perhaps confirmed by evidence from folklore and anthropology as well as language. There seems to be a considerable amount of evidence attesting to the continued presence in Europe of descendants of the Khazars. How important in quantitative terms is that presence? All right, so how important, how big of a presence he's saying, right? He's quoting other people here. The author's saying book saying, so how quantitative, how big is this, how important is this presence of the Caucasian sons of Japhet? Alright? Let's go. You might be Khazar, you might not be a Semitic origin, you're not important. The presence of the sons of Japhet and the tents of Shem. What? Oh, he's going biblical now. Because remember the Bible, right? In the story of the Bible says that the descendants of Japhet will dwell in the tents of Shem and they will serve them. Alright? So, again, how important is in quantitative terms is the presence of the Caucasian sons of Japhet. Caucasian sons of Japhet. Remember the rabbis say, we're Caucasian. Remember, 80% European DNA in the tents of Shem. Alright, remember, they're not Semitic. The most radical pounded concerning the Khazar's origin of Jewry is the professor of Jewish history at Tel Aviv University, A.N. Polyak. His book, Khazaria, in Hebrew, was published in 1944 and Tel Aviv, second edition in 1951. In his introduction, he writes, the facts demand. All right, so source, primary source for them, right? He's a Jewish history professor at Tel Aviv University. He wrote a book, saying a new approach, both problem of the relations between the Khazar Jewry and other Jewish communities, and to the question of how far we can go, and regarding this Khazar Jewry as the nucleus of the large Jewish settlement in Eastern Europe. All right, the descendants of this settlement, those who stayed where they were, those who emigrated to the United States and to other countries, and those who went to Israel, meaning the state of Israel, constitute now the large majority of world Jewry. All right, letting you know this professor in 1944 book he wrote, right, that the Khazar Jewries, or these Jewish Khazars, right, basically either stayed there, all right, emigrated to the United States and other countries, and or went into Israel, and they are the large majority of world Jewry today. All right, they are the nucleus of this Jewish settlement in Europe, the Khazars. He's letting you know, this professor. This was written before the full extent of the Holocaust was known, but that does not alter the fact that the large majority of surviving Jews in the world is of Eastern European, and thus perhaps mainly of Khazar origin. If so, this would mean that their ancestors came not from the Jordan, but from the Volga, okay? Not from Canaan, not from America, but from the Caucasus, once believed to be the cradle of the Aryan race, and that genetically they are more closely related to the Hun. Alright, the Hun. We're going to see these people related to Mongols, that are related to Turks earlier. Alright. I better related to the Han, Uyghur, and Magyar tribes than to the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're not related. They're not descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Should this turn out to be the case, then the term anti-Semitism would become void of meaning, based on misapprehension shared by both the killers and their victims. The story of the Khazar Empire, as it slowly emerges from the past, begins to look like the most cruel hoax which history has ever perpetrated. All right, so it has a lot of information and history on the sources, the main sources of ancient times that say, their conversion and everything. And we're gonna start dealing with videos that I'm gonna be doing regarding genealogies of the nations. Try to see if we can try to figure out some of them, see who they descend to, like where did the Greeks come from, where the Romans come from, things like that. And so right now we're dealing with the Khazars, right? And again, this is part 2 of the heritage. Just a quick sample. We're going to be talking about who are the real Mongols, who are the real Russians, and all this stuff, right? It says here Exodus part 5. So we skipped a lot, right? We're going to part 5. The evidence, additional view held by 19th century historians, the Khazars, after defeat by the Russians, the Russos, the Mongols, in 965, they got defeated by Genghis Khan, lost their empire, but retained their independence with narrow frontiers in their Judaic faith well into the 13th century. Remember, they converted, so it was a religion to them. They even seem to have reverted to some extent to their eastward wild predatory habits. Barron comments. In general, the kingdom persevered. It waged more or less effective defense against all foes until the middle of the 13th century, when it fell victim to the great Mongol invasion, so-called Mongol. Mongol means great, the Great Empire invasion, set in motion by Genghis Khan. Alright, so they got defeated by Russia, they got invaded by Mongols. We're talking about the same people. Alright, future video, we're going to put all this together, that's why I wanted to get into this. Even then, it resisted stubbornly until the surrender of all its neighbors. Its population was largely absorbed by the Golden Horde. Who's the Golden Horde? Talking about so-called Mongols. We're just talking about the Russian army. Alright, we're going to get into who the Golden Horde really is and where was its main epicenter. Alright, where was its main epicenter? Alright, and what does it have to do with Batu Khan and the Vatican? Where is the Golden Horde capital? Alright, so again, this population of the Khazars was largely absorbed by who? Golden Horde, so-called Mongols, the Russian armies, which had established the center of its empire in Khazar territory. But before and after the Mongol upheaval, the Khazars sent many offshots into the subdued Slavonic lands, helping ultimately to build up the great Jewish centers of the Eastern Europe. Alright, you got the sources for that. So a lot of them had already bounced, the Khazars, before they even got invaded. And they had already had large so-called Jewish centers, because remember, they converted. Alright, and they became the Eastern Jews. Here then we have the cradle of numeric, culturally dominant part of modern Jewry. The offshoots to which Barron refers were indeed branching out long before the destruction of the Khazar state by the Mongols, as the ancient Hebrew nation had started branching into the diaspora long before the destruction of Jerusalem. Ethnically, the Semitic tribes on the waters of the Jordan and the Turco-Khazar tribes on the Volga were, of course, miles apart, right? They're not the same people. Ethnically, they're not. They're miles apart. These are different people. But they had at least two important formative factors in common. Each lived at a focal junction where the great trade routes connecting east and west, north and south intersect, a circumstance which predisposed them to become nations of traders, of enterprising travelers, or rootless cosmopolitans. Alright, so these Khazars, that's why you see them into all this little business, right? Running businesses, money, alright? Selling, trading, you see, because they were in the middle of this place. So it's just like in America, you're talking about like Central America, Mesoamerica, that's like in between two, like South America and North America, right? Connects both, right? It says here, as hostile propaganda has unaffectionately labeled them, alright? So rulers, cosmopolitans, right? So, but at the same time, their exclusive religion fostered a tendency to keep to themselves and stick together, to establish their own communities with their own places of worship, schools, residential quarters, and ghettos. Originally self-imposed. They created their own ghettos. They wanted the ghettos in whatever town or country they settled. This rare combination of wanderlust and ghetto mentality, this is old school. They're not talking about what we think is ghetto. They're talking about the old school ghetto from them. That ghetto mentality, reinforced by messianic hopes and chosen race pride. They wanted to be the chosen race. Alright, that's what he's saying. Pride. Both ancient Israelites and medieval trace their descent not to Shem, but to Japhet. Alright, even though they're not even Hebrew, they had the same kind of aspirations and kind of beliefs, even though they weren't them. Right? I didn't want this video too long. Just a little preview of what we're going to be getting into. All right.
All right. So that, like you said, that was a preview. That was like a hour long, but that was all historical information. There is also the after video, which he goes very deep into these things for the sake of understanding. Very, very deep into these things. I'm not going to play the whole thing because you're going to see how deep it goes to 23. So you can see 3 hours long, right? Because that's how much information it is. Not going to play the whole thing, but I'm going to show a part here for the sake of understanding. This just links names. It just talks about certain names, like I was saying, certain different types of names and how they all are linked together, that different ones are known at different points of time for the sake of understanding, that they're all connected, that all these names are actually connected for the sake of understanding. This is a really interesting one when going over ancient names and ancient places and ancient things of that for the sake of understanding. Very, very interesting. Once I finish this this live, I'm going to make sure I put a note in the description for the sake of understanding. And understand, things like this type of information, they're not going to always find someone who knows all this stuff. It's very rare to find someone like this. In fact, it's just like the only about 0.008 a lot of people would know this information, but this information is highly important. Or else, basically, went the wrong thing. This little really interesting site. The reason why I'm not going to show all that information for the sake of understanding is because all of it is basically here on their Jewish virtual library for the sake of understanding. They admit only thing they try to do is disconnect themselves from them, but they admit that everything that you're going to see tomorrow, y'all willing, all the names, right? The Khmer, these names like this, the Gomeri, all these names are connected for the sake of understanding. The Assyrians, they mix it with the AshkeNazi, like right here, this name, and where's the other one? Let's see if they got it here. The Sumerians. Don't list the Sumerians on here, but yes, they're also connected with the Sumerians. You can see the sons of Gomer, AshkeNazi, sons of Gomer. These are all going to be connected. It's going to be all connected for the sake of understanding. The only thing they try to do, like I said, that's why we went through all that information. Actual historical information to who they are. Genetic study tells us word for word that those people are European. That the north of it, not the south, but the north. Then that's why they tried to say, right there. It says this. You can see right here, discovery also effectively disproves the idea that the Ashkenazis were descendants from the Khazars who converted to Judaism during the 8th and 9th century. Obviously, it doesn't. This does not disprove it at all because they tried to give you just the least of the information, but the actual information, the actual historical or the genetical studies says otherwise for the sake of understanding. It says otherwise. It tells us that the Ashkenazi, and so that's why we wanted to go over this. We want to go over this information because it's very important. Linking with the names, obviously, yeah, it's a long time for the though it's worth it. Those 3 hours will change to understand, but I'm not gonna play it. It is very, very interesting. Let's go up. Just real fast and what I know is but this is the note right here. It just talks about Gomer's origins. That's all it's talking about. And what we're going to do is we're going to go all the way to the Assyrian records, which just for the understanding, let's see if one of these are the ones I want to pull up fast. Yes, right here. It just talks about pretty much, some of the Assyrian records. It'll be at, actually look at that once this opens up. Right here, you can see, we can look at some of those 30,000 different writings from the Assyrians. What's interesting is that writings that they have the Sumerians on it, which are the same with them, but the Sumerians, you're going to see how they also are connected to them. So you can see, if you look at Yiddish, you can see very similar things that you understand. Here, it's going to be those writings that you understand. And you'll see some famous names like the Elamites, Hittites, Babylonians, Assyrians, right? Sumerians. These are going to be very, very well-known names in the Bible. So you're going to see some of these things. I just want to go and pull up that one spot just to show just that little history. But now, for the sake of be very deep. Here in 1:15, just go to that real fast. Turn it sideways because I know the screen shrinks when it's like that. So 1:8:15. Start there.
The country which lies between the Caspian Sea and the Tigris, and in the mountains of Media and Persia. We see that in very ancient times they mixed with the Assyrians. Again, they mixed with who? Assyrians, and that they even ruled over them for several centuries. Who ruled over the Aryans? Ruled over the Assyrians, and they mixed. So the Assyrians became Aryans too, right? Who were the Assyrians? The people of Ashur, who was a son of Shem. They were Semitic people, not Hebrews, but they were Semitic people of Shem too, who mixed with who? Japheth's people, the Aryans. All right, Assyrians.
Because of Aryan, that's also coming from that AshkeNazi. That's going to be all related. All those things are going to be related. That's why this longer video is connecting all these names. Like you see right there, Gomer's, all those names, for the sake of understanding.
Keep in mind the Assyrians. We're going to get back to the Assyrians so you can see what I'm talking about. But we're going to continue with Japheth then, which is all designated to indicate the extent of its domain, the Indo-European race. To this race we ourselves belong. So he's saying, because he's white, oh, this is our race. It is a race noble beyond all others. The race, he says, they're noble, even though it basically seems to have been people who invaded most of the time other nations. All right, it is a race noble beyond all others, the race which province. All right, I'm not reading that. Hi, Jack. It says here that there is spoken for the more nation. Now, I guess he's going to get into the Magog, his son, and who's his nations. It says this represents a group of nations more extensive than others, and a very peculiar physiognomy. We speak of Magog. This name is sacred scripture is almost always associated with Gog. The very frequent allusions in the Hebrew prophets to the incursions and ravages of the sons of Gog and Magog induce us to recognize them as the nomadic tribes of the northeast near the Caspian Sea. Their name has been compared to that of the Massagetha. The historian Josephus, the recorder of traditions of the Jewish nation, calls them Scythians, right? They're Scythians. Everything seems to prove that the inspired writer of the book of Genesis, under the name of Magog, intended to represent the numerous tribes composing the secondary race now designated by science, Turanians, all right? By science, not just biblical scripture, by science. Same people. This race was one of the largest both numerically and with regard to the extent of territory which it occupies. Is divided into two great branches, the Ugro-Finnish and the Dravidian, the Finnish, Finland, right? Finnish, the Ugro-Finnish and the Dravidian. The first must be, again, divided into the Turkish, including the populations of Turkestan, out of this, and steppes of Central Asia, as well as the Hungarians or the Huns, the Hungarians, right, who have been for a long time settled in Europe, and the Uralo-Finnish group comprising the Finns, the Estonians, the Tushudis, and in general nearly all the tribes of the north of Europe and Asia. Again, all these cold places, right, all these descendants of Japhet, right, Japhet.
So obviously, if there would be Shemites, they'd be closely related to Shem. But if they was going to be Hamites, they'd be closely related to Ham. But if there be Japhanites, they'd be closely related to Japheth, to Japheth. We have to admit that Because if we don't admit to the truth, nor do we examine the truth, nor do we speak the truth, then we live in a lie. Understand that. Let's look at something down here. I just want to do that so I can go down. Just want to go down here, and now I want to talk about something. Last thing I talk about. Let's just go down. Hold up. Go. Down and go over a genetic report for the sake of understanding why he's doing why. We just close this thing. All right. This thing like fighting with me. Let's go to it. Go to this. All right. I want to go to the one. So I'm gonna turn this scroll it because on the side it's not going down. Okay. Let's see. Here it is. All right. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this last thing. So, the Y chromosome of the AshkeNazi. What I want to talk about real fast is where it's at on the chart. It's on the European side, for the sake of understanding. You'll see it be the R's, where you can see right here, R, A1, whatnot, like R1, A1, things like that. This one's the line from the AshkeNazi right here, right? It's saying basically Europe, basically Northeast Europe, for the sake of understanding. So that's what it's saying that they are related to. They're looking at their father's line. Very important to understand that this is actually well known, for the sake of understanding. That's what you're seeing here. On this line will be more the European. And just to show you that this is truth, 14:8.
Now, there are changes that occur, and those are called mutations. So let's
look here.
Group is discovered or set aside, and so the tree ends up branching and branching and branching. So let's look at just a rudimentary, simplified look of the Y chromosome haplogroups. If you've ever gone to YDNA to your site on FTDNA to look at,
so you can see right there, A, Africa, R, Europe, European.
Your own specific haplotree.
And then notice what it says here. A00 is the oldest. Well, to be honest with you, they say that they can find the age, origins of race. They found AA to be in a certain group, which is the purest. Well, you can see right there, it shows the oldest, but it's just because it has all of them, for the sake of understanding. And I'll show you where we also see that AA, for the sake of understanding, that AA line.
If you haven't done that, I recommend you do it. I have some screenshots in a little bit.
But you can see there, that's going to be, more of your European. Now let's go back, for the sake of understanding. I just want to show you that that's a real screenshot. And it also tells us in that video, tells us that that's where the European line is at, for the sake of understanding. Now, we can see that. We can see that the line of Japheth, of the AshkeNazi, they had the R, what you see right there, right? Very important to see that. The reason why is because we actually know for a fact, 100% fact, that many people already say that they are related to the Khazars, for the sake of understanding. They say that indeed they are related to the Khazars. Now, let's look at that AA line, for the sake of understanding. There's only one people that had that original AA line, and they are known today as the African Americans. Not the Africans. Those are different people. In fact, they know they are different people, as this report says, right? We reportedly discover right? We report the discovery of an African American Y chromosome that carries the ancestral state of all, basically what you saw there. This is kind of like the play on the word father of nations, for the sake of understanding. He basically has all the genetics of all people, for the sake of understanding. They find it in high frequencies, as it says. The AA lineage was discovered in a large database, of consumer samples of African Americans. And you see there? And has not been identified with traditional hunter-gatherer populations of sub-Saharan Africa. So it's saying the African Americans are not the same people as other Africans. They are different people. And very important to understand, because these things are actually well known when you start to understand the Inquisition, some of the ancient writings that were written about the Inquisition. So isn't it interesting? Talk about father of nation. You know what I'm saying? Talk about father of nations, because that Y chromosome has everyone's chromosome in it. See how that works like that? Very interesting. Almost like it's not even just a saying, but actually a way to find out. And we can also find out where that was found. Can be traced all the way back historically to the original Israelites, for the sake of understanding. It can be traced further back. We can look at actual historical documents and all those things. But we have to understand one genetic, right? The Dar genetics and I was gonna go to that last thing, but I'm gonna do this last. I want to information. Y'all will, as that has been on my heart to go over these things for the sake of understanding. And I'm gonna see what's up with this. Why is this? I don't know. Maybe let me see if is this one doing it? No, no. For some reason, that note does that. I don't know why. That note just like. It's so strange. I've never seen it do that before. But we just go fast down. I don't know why that note does that. I never heard a note that does that. But that note does that. That's a strange thing, for the sake of understanding. But I want to show you something. I'm doing a note on announcing people, but I just want to show you this really interesting.
This video on the history of Armenia is sponsored by Squarespace. If you need a new, beautiful-looking website, go to Squarespace AD when a chaotic period began.
This one's really interesting. I'm gonna do a note on this later. I'll explain why. Not now, but I want to get to something else. But I'm gonna do a note on that a little later, because it has a connection. It has a connection. To things. Look at that. See, that's very interesting. That note does that. It's the only book that does that. That's so strange. Another note. So say. I don't know. Let's click this now. Does this do it? Does it do it? Let's see. Maybe my notes are misbehaving. I don't know. Maybe they're misbehaving. I don't know why. Try it one more time. Let's see if this one's like that. Yeah. I'll see what's up. It must be some bug or something. Something's up. Something's up with that. But I want to show you one part here. I just want to go down. So it's just, to me, it's interesting. That they have studies that show that their mother, from the mother's line, is not and fully not Shemite, for the sake of understanding, completely. But let me just go down and now I don't want to do DNA studies. Do DNA studies if we need to do DNA studies. But I want to show more thing here because it's on my mind a bit. I want to go over this thing. I just want to go down and show something. Just gotta find it. All this is going to be, historical, scriptural, actual information. That's very important on some things.
15 years.
So this is the last thing I want to show you. I just want to show you something here. Well, I'll let this one. I'm not gonna show this one. I'll show this another time. That one's interesting too, but that's not what I want to do. Let's go. I'm gonna show you right here. I believe it's this. Let me make sure. Okay, so I'm going to show you the basic understanding of what happened.
Khazar was a nomadic ethnic that lived in the north part of the Caucasus Mountains on 6th century. They were one of the Turks which established the Khazaric again in 7th century due to the fall of the Western Gokturk. In the 8th century, many of the Khazars who practiced shamanism finally converted to Judaism. Khazars have a good relationship with the Empire, but having conflicts with the Arabian.
Look how small Israel is compared to the that's so many of them. They was able to break this way and break this way, and you have so many of them for the sake of understanding.
Until the 9th, the Pequaneg ethnic invaded the Khazaria Empire. This makes the Khazarian weaker. The Khazarian Empire fell when the Kiev and Rus ethnic under Volodymyr the Great, which is also defeated the Volga Bulgars. After the fall, the Khazar finally disappeared from the history. However, is that really the Khazars disappeared after the fall? There were some theories that may help us to determine where are the Khazars now. Some theories stated that the Khazars were not disappeared, instead migrating to the west and forming the parts of the core of the Ashkenazi Jewish population in Europe. According to
right, you see right here, it's gonna be Germany, right? On the map, with that.
Ashkenazi Jews are the European Jews. They only have 3% similarity compared with ancient ancestors, which connected them with the Greeks in the Middle East. This means the Ashkenazi Jews ancient Ashkenazi, some Ashkenazi converted to Judaism before migrating to the Middle East for establishing a Jew country there. According to Aaron, an Asian DNA is also found in Ashkenazi Jews. So it could be determined that an Asian DNA is actually the Khazar DNA, which converted to Judaism. There, it was said that the Khazars have been absorbed in Ashkenazi Jews. This means the Khazars were only disappeared from the history, but not for their people. Khazars were related with Turkic and Cumans. There were some which possibly have been absorbed into the Ashkenazi Jews, such as Karl Marx, Albert Einstein, Hitler, Mark Zuckerberg, and many
Just a summary of the truth. So now you got a summary of the truth. For the sake of understanding, this is what we're doing this week. This week, that's what we're doing. So with that, family, be blessed, be beloved,